Welcome to Daredevil in the Details, a show that explores and dotes on the philosophy and themes of Disney's Daredevil Born Again, a digression collection brought to you by Method to the Madness and the ZeroIndent Patreon subscribers. I'm author DC McNeil, and we are very quickly running into the risk of me reading the entire transcript of these episodes on the show. That's how good some of this writing is. I'm joined as always by Patrick from A Method to the Madness, who we go to live on the streets of New York City. Patrick, what do you think, knowing that Hector is the White Tiger, and should he be found guilty or innocent? What's your verdict?
I just don't know if vigilantes should be running around, you know? Hey, leave it to the cops, you know?
I'm not going to tell you how to live your life, but it's like, you know, the streets, there's lots of crime, you know?
Hey, someone disturbs my privacy, I take my piece, put it to their head.
I look after my business, you look after your business. What's so complicated about that? We are joined, of course, by Darth, as always. Darth, what do you think about vigilantes in New York City now that crime is on the rise?
Oh, I'm all in favor of it. I want to go full Punisher. They do their thing. Take some of the workload off of the cops. I think they're doing good work out there.
Yeah, because the cops are definitely working too hard. That's the problem. Oh, golly me. If these episodes don't have a little bit to say and think about policing and the way that policing has changed in America, because I think if the last episodes, in the last episode we talked about, we were forced to wonder which parts of Daredevil the show would choose to reboot. And I think in this episode, we're forced to contend with the fraternity of policing and the fragile strategy of Matt Murdock's defense of Hector. Because this week we're talking about Daredevil Born Again, episodes 2 and 3, episode 2, Optics, and episode 3, The Hollow of His Hand. Quick round the horn. Last time we were all pretty hot on this show. How we sitting this week now that we're kind of in the actual TV show and we sort of established what the thing is? What's the vibe?
I'm still pretty hot on it. It's like still going in the direction that I thought it was gonna go, like based on the first episode. Like it's kept that tone consistent, but also it's kind of thrown like a slight curveball with like, for example, the tone at the end of episode 2, stuff like that. I feel like it's going for a bit more of a pop feel.
Okay.
I don't know if that makes sense. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. I definitely think it's leaning into being a bit more pulpy, I think, certainly, than what we've seen this show be. We talked a lot in season 3 about the ways that each season of Daredevil is like a different genre, right? Like that first season is very much like a hardcore thriller. You kind of get the superhero fantasy along with the kind of, I guess you would call it like crime serial killer story with Frank Castle, and then you kind of get season 3 being that sort of espionage neo-noir. And I guess I think it's a challenge of a show to try and reboot and restart, because like it's not one thing, right? Each season kind of has its own kind of unique identity, and I think what they've landed on is somewhere between the religious epic of the first season and the kind of pulpy fantasy sort of thing of season 2. I think they're sustaining it pretty well so far. Yeah, what about you, Darth? What's your vibe?
I may have said this last time, I don't remember, but the first episode, I was very much still thinking about the previous season and how that season tied in with that new episode 1. By episode 2, I was now fully immersed in this season, and I almost wasn't thinking about what happened prior. So I really enjoyed getting out of my own head and just letting myself sink into this story and not trying to figure out, well, how did that get from there to here and so on and so forth. Especially with what they did with Hector's whole story. It was beautiful and tragic and entertaining and exciting. It was all of the things. I was vibing.
Yeah. The second he tells that little anecdote at the start of episode 3, I was like, this motherfucker dead. Like, he does not. I know how Daredevil goes. If you tell a pretty story about family and going home, you're never going home again, brother. I thought it was interesting the way that you talked about it when I was doing the edit, Darth, because I think even the language you use, I think, is conflationary, and I think is probably part of the reason why you were feeling that, because this isn't another season of Daredevil. This is a different show, right? Like, this isn't season 4. This is Daredevil Born Again. This is a completely different set of showrunners. It's, what did we say, Pat? 8 years after the 7 years after the third season. Completely different creative team. The only real overlap is the main creator, whose name I keep fucking forgetting, the showrunner. Scarter Payne was the producer and writer for Netflix's Punisher, but it's a completely different vehicle, like to the point where, and part of this is like Hollywood accounting, where what they, you know, when they looked to reboot this, what they didn't want to have to do was pay everyone in the original royalties to keep reusing. There's a Hollywood legalese thing with film and TV where if they had just been like Marvel's Daredevil, then they would have to continue paying royalties to the original creators. But by like making it a new show, they don't have to do that, so they get out of that obligation, which is super scummy. But that's kind of the fiscal motivation behind those decisions. But yeah, I think it's just important to note, I guess, for the audience, that this is a completely different thing entirely. It's not a season 4. It's a whole new thing. Although you can view it, I think, in some ways as something akin to a season 4. But yeah, I just think it's an important note.
Which is interesting because, like, all the references that I've seen, people are still talking about it and referring it to season 4, episode 1, season 4, episode 2, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, internet's full of dummies. I don't know what to tell you.
Well, I was going to say we do the same, like, stupid stuff at work because you have to, the accounting department has to call stuff one reason just for money. You know, they have to call it that for money, and everyone else in the world doesn't call it that, because they don't identify with how accountants, you know, so it makes total sense why everyone else is calling it season 4. And this sounds like I'm trying to defend myself, and that's not what I was trying to do.
So defensive, Darth.
Yeah, it came across as very defensive.
I know.
It's just interesting.
I really wasn't.
Come to your own conclusion, listener.
I also do want to. I want to tell you that I did not. I resisted watching episode 4. So. I know. So I'm going into this. Yep, I'm going into this conversation blind.
Excellent. We did it. We've engendered the kind of restraint that we're looking for here at ZeroIndent. We're a company that pulls our punches, holds our punch. You'll figure it out.
We're a company that tries to reason with them first, and then the punches come.
And then the punches come. Yeah, we try and talk you down, but if all else fails, we'll beat you down. You know.
We're also going to put up a counter for how many blind jokes I could sneak in, and that was one.
You did one last episode that me and Pat missed, and I'm glad that we didn't react because it was really bad. It was like, oh my god. All right, let's get stuck into it. Enough hanging out. So we are talking about episodes 2 and 3. First, we were talking about episode 2, Optics, directed by Michael Kustar, written by Matt Corman and Chris Ord. Again, you'll notice that these are sort of some pretty new names for us here from a production and writing perspective. So, Pat, could we please hear... my promise to you, Patrick, is that these summaries are shorter because these are mostly plot episodes. So, I apologize in advance for the listener for the brevity, but then for Patrick, you're welcome.
And then you got some dot points in here in a summary. That's new.
Yeah.
Okay.
Listen, Pat. We're experimenting here at the end of Daredevil in the Details. We're pivoting. We're just trying new things out.
Like the show. Okay. Wilson Fisk is the. Oh, sorry. Let me start again. Wilson Fisk is mayor of New York City. As he delivers his victory speech on New Year's Eve, we find the city in a state of ecstatic turmoil. Matt Murdock is red wine drunk, brooding as he listens to the fragments of conversation in Uptown. Elsewhere, Hector is walking home to his wife when he spots 2 men beating on a stranger. He intervenes, and in the struggle, accidentally trips one of the men who is vaporized by an oncoming train. The remaining man pulls a gun and badge and arrests Hector. Fisk tries to contend with his entry into office. He performs an optics stunt involving roadworks approval and attempts to deal with his wife's absence from his life. Meanwhile, Matt overhears Hector being tuned up by the cops in perp holding and volunteers Murdock and McDuffie to take on the case. BB of the BB Report visits Fisk for an interview, only for us to learn that BB is Ben Urich's niece and has the same nose for sniffing out Fisk's dirty laundry. A few things happen in quick succession. Fisk visits the dead cop's funeral service, only to have Commissioner Galloway?
I think it's Gallo. Is it Gallo? I'm pretty sure it's Gallo, right? I've written Galloway.
Fisk visits the dead cop's funeral service, only to have Commissioner Gallo do everything but spit in his direction. Cherrie and McDuffie visit Hector's wife, where Cherrie discovers that Hector is, in fact, the vigilante White Tiger. Commissioner Gallo resigns, only for Fisk to blackmail him into staying on during the transition. I guess it is blackmail. Elsewhere, after convincing the judge to suppress the White Tiger information from the case, Matt and Cherrie meet in the same Riverside parking lot that Ben and Karen met at so long ago. Cherrie opines that he likes this new Matt and this man who wears normal suits. Matt follows the dead cop's partner home and tracks the man to the apartment of the witness on the subway, Mickey. Matt warns Mickey that the cops... Nickey. It's Nickey.
Is it? Fuck.
I'm
taking
Torres.
L's today. God damn it.
I was like, it's not right.
Better?
Yes, thank you. Matt follows the dead cop's partner home and tracks the man to the apartment of the witness on the subway, Nickey. Matt warns Nickey that the cops are on their way and intends to kill Nickey. Nickey flees through the fire escape. Matt is beaten down by the cops, but when they draw a gun, Matt fights back, brutalizing the two men in a short, violent melee. Matt yells with rage as we cut to credits.
Interesting. Now, part of the challenge with this being a new TV show is no one's written anything down about it. So all of this is entirely reliant on me, A, watching the episodes, and B, getting the names right, which you might have noticed I'm not doing such a good job of. So I'm sure we will adjust as we go. This episode is really interesting to me because I think it is one of the things we talked about in season 3, at the risk of trying to connect all of this too much, is that season is very much the last TV show of the era of this mode of television that is thinking about policing in the way that we used to think about policing before George Floyd and before the kind of policing apparatus in America was kind of revealed to be this kind of fraternity panopticon that we're all sort of familiar with now. And I think this season of TV is very much dealing with the fact that it's on the other side of that. And it's also dealing with the fact that this is in some ways a reformed police department since Fisk's departure, but not necessarily a healed police department since Fisk's departure. Because if you recall, a big part of that season was Fisk essentially taking over the FBI, and by way of doing that, once again taking over the police as he did in season 1. But what's perhaps most compelling to me about this episode's imagining of the police, and kind of obviously the third episode in particular, when we have the court case itself, is it kind of forces itself to address the fact that this police force is kind of a frat house in some ways. If you're in, you're in. And if you're not in, you're not in. And they know Fisk is a bad guy. They don't like Fisk. They don't trust Fisk. But not because Fisk is a criminal necessarily. That's part of what they say. That's part of the live of how this police force defines itself. But mostly they don't like Fisk because he's not one of them, right? And that's part of the kind of deal here is Fisk has to re-ingratiate himself with, frankly, the adults in the room, right? He's been able to kind of pull this popularist rug over the eyes of the public and win the votes, and in some ways doing that through some corrupt means. But the adults in the room kind of look at him and they go, we kind of know who you are, dude. Like, you need to do better than what you've been doing. We're not going to take you seriously as some kind of a political contender. Like, you're not our guy. I mean, that's kind of the story of this episode for me in some ways, alongside Hector, and his kind of entanglement with this policing apparatus. But I mean, we start with the same night as the previous episode. Matt's sort of sitting at home. He's drinking red wine. He's sort of having a bit of a dark night of the soul here, as he reflects on the fact that Fisk has won. And kind of concurrent to this, we see this stranger who we'll come to know of as Hector, who just intervenes in this beat up between these two guys, drops these two cops, and the way that this scene goes from, okay, yeah, this is like a fight in a TV show, to just the most hardcore shit. It happens like that. It's like it turns on a dime, because they're roughing each other up. He's taken on these two guys. He mostly has the upper hand, and one of the guys goes to kick Hector, and Hector kind of, he later will describe this as this cop tripping. I'm not sure that is how I read the kind of choreography of this scene. It seems to me more like Hector gets out of the way of the kick, and this is what causes the cop to kind of trip over Hector, and just completely pasted by an oncoming train, like just eviscerated by an oncoming train, and you sort of have half of Hector's face, covered in blood. It's pretty harrowing. But yeah, a pretty full-on opening to this episode.
Yeah, I like that detail as well, the vagueness of like what actually happened, because I don't know, I think it's less interesting if Hector is just unabashedly like the good guy in this, and he's like, because everyone puts on a performance in that courtroom, right? Like, I was just going home to my wife, and he's my partner, he's my best friend for 8 years or whatever. I think that's a detail that makes it a bit more messy. If like he was, I'm not saying like he tripped him, but like, yeah, it does look like Hector did a move, like he anticipated the kick and he did the move that like made the guy trip or something. And I love that when he hits the train, and then Hector just like does one of these, like he immediately like comprehends what just happened. He's like, oh fuck, like that is not at all what I wanted.
There's this way that I think in a post John Wick era of action, there's a way I think that combat in stories like this can be trivialized in a way where one of the things that we all really like, I think, and I'll speak for us as a group because I think this is true, of the original Daredevil show, right, is the physicality of the choreography, and particularly by the time you get to that third season where you have a reduced Matt Murdock, and he's basically just boxing the whole time, right? He can't really do any big flippy stuff, and he's certainly completely reduced in that way. This is the most I've gone, oh, they've taken that instinct for that type of combat, and they've gone, what if we just like dialed it up to the gnarliest it could go without without becoming kind of a gore fest, right? It's the fact that he, like, to your point, Pat, the fact that he comprehends it immediately is like, yeah, okay, maybe this kind of thing has happened before to this dude, right? Like he doesn't seem, he knows it's broken bad like straight away, right? He knows what's happened. But also, he doesn't seem immediately panicked. He seems more like resigned to like an, oh shit, this, and then the guy pulls the badge and gun, and it's like, and then it goes from oh shit to like, oh shit, like, how did this go so wrong so quickly, right? And that's something that I think it's Michael Mann when I can't remember what, I've been watching a lot of Michael Mann lately, but might have been on the commentary of Collateral, or probably Collateral or Manhunting maybe, where he talks about like in one of the keys to like really good action choreography is the physicality of the way that you have your actors move their bodies right up until the moment where the actual fighting starts, and then they lose control, right? And then it goes from I have a plan of how I'm going to deal with these two guys to now I'm just in it, and it's that kind of breaking down, and that the gateway into entropy is the thing that he talks about in that commentary track, where that gateway into entropy is how you sell an action sequence, because that's, what does the character do when they're about to get into the mix, right? Hector doesn't, when he sees this happen, he starts yelling at these guys and approaching. He doesn't like square up and, try and posture. He's like, leave the guy, like he just immediately gets in there and he's like, leave the guy alone, like, get away from him, like, what are you doing? Guy's like, it's none of your business. And then it pops off. And the fact that it pops off and then it's literally 20 seconds later where this guy is pasted on the train, I just think it's an explosive way to open the story, but it also entangles itself immediately with the Fisk plot, because we've got the B plot, and obviously they have aesthetic similarity, and they're both about cops, but also literally the B plot is Fisk dealing with the fact that none of the cops like him, and we've got this case that is just such a potent, chance accident type of thing that's going to accelerate and force some of that stuff into conflict with each other. It's very cool. Darth, what have you got on this little fight sequence here? Does this work in the same way for you?
One interesting thing about the choreography that you were just talking about was the fact that, and I don't know enough about White Tiger to actually know what the amulet does that they keep referencing. I know it gives him like extra strength. And I don't remember from that, you see one CCTV clip of him fighting somebody, like he's defending someone who's, or attacking someone who's robbing a store or something like that. And I can't remember if he actually knows how to fight versus what we see here, meaning does the amulet actually give him the skill that he doesn't have here, which is why we see this more brawl type fight versus a skilled, he's blocking and the stuff that a fighter would know how to do. So the movement that he does is directly like contrary to how he moves later when he has the amulet on, which was, very intentional for them to do. So that's, it's a cool little thing when you, I also don't know about the very beginning, when if they had wanted to really make it ambiguous, like Pat was talking about with, is it more likely that he could have killed this cop on purpose, just to end the fight or whatever? Like if you cut out the fact that he's like carrying the roses, which is, a romantic indicator. If you cut out like the lines where he's like, oh, stop, don't hurt that guy, and have the audience come in like halfway through the fight, and you just see like half of it, you don't see the beginning, then you would be like, oh, maybe he really did kill this dude on purpose. Right?
Yeah, but I guess the question is like, what's more effective for the episode? Is it the dramatic irony of watching this court case continue to go wrong, and like, not to get ahead of where we're up to, but people continue to lie on the stand about what really happened? Is that more instrumental and dramatic than us trying to figure out what happened, right? I think there's a do you know what I mean? Like, I think they would produce a very different next episode. Is perhaps my point. If we didn't see what actually happened,
it's connecting to like Matt's life, right? Like it's him. It's and I like how it's basically like this could have happened to Matt at any point, like accidentally killing someone, and then like, if that was the case, then I lost my train of thought.
Well, I think it's pretty telling that, we get the BB report sort of interstitial here, and the one of these fucking talking heads dudes, he goes like, are the strong obligated to protect the weak? Yeah, they are, but then they're kind of whiny about it, and then they prey on the weak. And I think this story is really asking that question, right? Which is like, how much of himself does Matt see in Hector? And it turns out this isn't he doesn't see parts of himself in Hector. This is a mirror, right? This is the guy Matt could have become if, like, just to be honest with you, if Foggy hadn't died, right? You can see Matt's, personal life with Karen evolving into something resembling this, and him ending up in a position like this if he doesn't stop the vigilantism because Foggy gets killed, right? Like, this is sort of a sliding doors universe version of himself in a lot of ways. And yeah, the fact that this could just have happened to Daredevil at any given point in his career on the streets is what makes this potent. Like, this could just have been a Tuesday for Hector, and it kind of was, right?
Yeah.
And in some ways,
right. Yeah. So, which is why like it's probably more effective to have him be like the victim, more or less, in this sense. I know another dude got killed, but like he's, he is the innocent guy who was, trying to save another person, which is what like Matt would have done. And so, yeah, like to what you were saying, Darth, like to connect that back, like I think that's probably why it isn't as ambiguous. It's because you need the parallel drawn between White Tiger and Matt, like pretty directly, is what I'm thinking.
Yeah. And that also makes it even more credulous that Matt believes him, right? And and this episode does a cool trick, I think, where if you're not keyed in properly to the fact that Matt can tell when someone's lying, like if you're just a casual viewer, the fact that he's so adamant this dude is telling the truth might make you kind of feel like McDuffie, where you're like, what is your deal with this guy? Like, why are you trying to, like, our law firm is not in a good spot. What are you doing right now? We don't have the resources for this. It produces a very particular feeling to Hector and his case. And it also, I think, heightens the family drama, right? Some of the stuff we get with his wife and some of the stuff we'll get in the next episode about sort of what he was doing that evening. It just makes this even more tragic that, you know, in a lot of ways, he was the right guy in the wrong place at the right time. Just this confluence of poor luck for Hector and the fact that he doesn't have the amulet on him. Because to Darth's point before, my guesstimate, to be honest with you, the show was not interested in an answer to this, but my guesstimate of like what the amulet does in this version of their show is that what you said, it just gives him like a lot of strength, because later on you hear about him like, you know, lifting a car off to somebody or something like that, right? Doing something that physically is impossible. And so my guess is like, yeah, he's not used to fighting, but also he's been doing this for a while. He's probably like picked up a little bit of, you know, decent hand to hand, but he's not a Daredevil or a Danny Rand or, you know, by any means anybody like that. But he's also not the complete curmudgeon with physical melee that is like a Jessica Jones or someone who will just... Jessica's two moves are grab you and throw you or punch you. That's her entire repertoire. He's sort of somewhere in between those two kind of ends of the spectrum when it comes to someone with super strength. But yeah, great opening. We then sort of do you guys have anything else? I mean, obviously the Matt stuff is pretty straightforward. It's just the fallout of the previous episode, him sitting there brooding. I think the next thing I have is Fisk's little... I don't even know what you'd call this. It's not a monologue, but he kind of opines about this desk. That's kind of the next thing I have.
Oh, yeah. Is that when he goes on about the old mayor of New York?
Fiorello LaGuardia, who was a real dude, and this show does some weird shit with history. So this guy was a real dude. He was the 99th mayor of New York, and he was the guy that was famous, like the Tammany Hall Democratic mayor. He basically was instrumental in deconstructing the Tammany Hall Democratic Party, like kind of injunction, right? That intervention from the Irish that kind of let them have the Democratic Party kind of held at gunpoint. And Fisk sort of talks about Fiorello as this kind of figure that was his father's. His father looked up to Fiorello LaGuardia, which I think is really interesting because we've seen Fisk's father. Now, Fisk's father is kind of a schmuck. He's kind of this gormless guy who never quite made it, who takes out his aggression on the rest of the world and has this posture about him of a man who missed his shot and would like to have a station higher than his own. And his dad, of course, fails to be elected mayor because Fisk kills him, right? And now you have Wilson Fisk sitting in this chair opining about how old this desk is, and then talking about Fiorello LaGuardia, probably thinking to himself, did my father's icon, did this person that my father looked up to, my father's hero, did he sit at this very desk once upon a time? I think it's a very potent bit of subtext that works as a little scene with him and his assistant, his aide, where, you know, his head of staff kind of brings up Vanessa and they have a little bit of they talk about it being a problem with the narrative. She makes it very callous and cold and a political mechanism. I think that frames itself really nicely against this sort of really ambiguous little monologue that Fisk gives. They get Fisk right here for me.
So I hadn't.
He's like sort of reveling in like the fulfillment of his ambition kind of thing.
Yeah, well, yeah, but then I think the ambiguity is like, but is that really, like, is this really that? Because it's also, because I think he knows in and of himself that he hasn't come by this honestly, right? So I think it's also the question of like, well, would his father even be proud of him if he had done, like, if he got it this way? Or is this exactly the kind of bullshit his father would have done because his father was exactly the type of guy that would do this kind of thing? Like, it's that... Yeah, that's where the ambiguity is for me.
I was just gonna say I hadn't made that connection at all that that his dad did run and lost, and like is this supposed to be like further proof that Fisk is now clean because he's trying to outdo his dad's legacy and he's no longer focused on the criminal stuff, or is this like the opposite and it's like I'm still the same person, I'm still trying to outlive my dad's shadow, so I'm going to do what he never could do.
Exactly, right? And the fact that I don't think Fisk knows, right? Like, I think, yeah, and especially the fact that Vanessa comes up. Vanessa in some ways is part of the problem because she's still working she's still running the criminal empire in this episode. And to be honest with you, she's not here, right? And so that, like, it's this brilliant, like, the part of him that his father would not be proud of, which is the kingpin, is being run by Vanessa, and his aide is like, you need to bring that into this office. It's a really, like, there's some pretty potent, I think, symbolism there. If, so that's a free article idea for somebody. I'm certainly not going to write that, but it's there, right? It's the what's that thing like if you have to do, we talk about it a lot with George Bush Jr., right? But like, if you have to do bad things to get into a position, it's a bad position, and the devil will be on your call sheet, right? There is no way for Fisk to do this job without getting his hands dirty, which we see pretty quickly. He does his first bit of dirt in this episode, and it's like we talked about with some of the corruption and stuff like that in when we did the Batman coverage. Like, one bad thing begets more bad things, right? And you never stop, and there's no way out. And you wish there was a way out, but there just isn't, and you have to keep doing it, and then, until the position's gone. And I like how slowly this starts for Fisk with this simple question of, where's Vanessa? Like, this is a problem for the narrative that your wife isn't here. Like, we need to fix this problem. Something as simple as that is the pebble that will roll down the hill, that will knock the stone, that will knock the boulder, that will eventually bring all of this crashing down, is I guess what we have to assume is going to happen. Yeah.
There's a theme I picked up like later on in the episode, which I'm now seeing applied to like a lot of things here, which is the theme is basically like about going backwards and like losing progress. The Fisk, opining about being elected, officially, like legitimately, and contrasting that against his descent into, criminality once again. Once a thug, always a thug, as Gallo says to him later on. Yeah, that's all making sense to me, and like, yeah, I mean, I'll bring up this theme as like we talk about things, but I think that sort of runs consistently throughout this episode.
Well, and from that as well, right? Like, particularly in the next episode, these two men are desperately trying to not be the thing that they used to be, right? They have this, the past is literally like nipping at their heels, and they are like doing everything they can to outrun it.
Which is why Matt is so like involved in Hector in this case, is because Hector for him is it's a mirror to him. It's like, and sorry, I'm skipping ahead, but there's bits where he's like, there's a lot you can do to help people without the mask, that kind of stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's a running theme for like 5 different characters. It's Matt, Fisk, the informant, Hector himself is told like, you have to stop being this, you have to start being, you have to stop being the superhero, you got to start being this. Everyone, and there was one more that I thought of too, but there's all of these different people have that pull towards one or the other, and it's just a recurring theme with so many different characters, and I hadn't picked up on that until Pat said it.
Yeah, well, the thing that tipped me off was Vanessa talking about herself later on. I think she's another character that theme applies to. Yeah,
because she's being pulled towards the criminal empire. But she's lonely without Fisk is how I'm interpreting it.
Yeah, but I think in some ways she's lonely with Fisk as well, right? I think that's the deep tragedy of what we get in the next episode is like, even with him, I think she feels more lonely than she did when he was away. There's a distance.
And at least when he was away, she was like sort of prospering and stuff, you know.
Yeah,
she was in a calm.
And I think there's a question that these two episodes posit for Vanessa and Fisk, which is, to what extent does she maybe resent a little bit of how he gave in to her request at the end of season 3 and brings her into the world of the criminal empire and his criminality, and she gets a taste for it. And to an extent, she kind of can't imagine a life in any other type of way now than that. And so there's something really curious to me about their dynamic where she's kind of like, well, you brought me into it, and now you're saying that you need to be completely clean and you need to be the one with the clean hands. But like, you're the reason why I am in this position at all as the head of this crime syndicate. There's something really interesting there from a texture perspective of trying to figure out like, what are her actual true feelings toward Fisk, and has she figured that out yet and unpacked that yet? I think the answer is pretty definitively she doesn't have a good view yet, is my feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Doesn't her dialogue from the last episode kind of point towards like this is all like PTSD or something from when like Fisk got shot in Echo, and she said something about like I sat at your bedside for months or whatever, and then I had to go on and pull myself together. You know, it was something like that, and it made me think that her whole mental shift happened after that, and not as a result of being brought into the criminal empire, but it was a result of his damage, and then maybe that's where she lost him.
Well, she says that he left. So the line that you're referring to is she goes, it's something like, I sat by that bed for months, and then you left and then you left that bed, right? Like, you left me, basically. So I think it's the question of why Fisk left, I think, is like, he says I had to rebuild myself, right? But I don't have
an involved recovery process.
Yeah, exactly. But I don't have an answer, Darth. Like, and I think that's part of what I think is really cool here, right? Is like, the show is willing to go, I don't know, we'll figure it out. Like, these people they haven't internalized and introspected enough to have a clear view of how they even think and talk about it, right? Like, I'm sure we'll get some of that in the torturous therapy that we've been seeing. I'm sure we will get some more of that in those scenes, which is really exciting. I love it. I love a TV show that's like, give me a marriage counseling session that's just awful. I love it. I love it. It's so uncomfortable. There's some big stuff here that's probably worth noting. So, Fisk is stuck in traffic, and he does this stupid stunt where there's a hole in the middle of the road, and he basically just gets these guys to fill it in.
I'm sure that's how it works too.
Yeah, exactly.
Permit approved. He says it's not rocket science, but I don't know. That was a pretty big hole. I'm pretty sure there's more to it than just pouring in concrete.
And it's on an overpass, so like it seems more complicated than.
Seems much more complicated, yeah.
It's also the kind of smooth brain popularism that's like, well, if we just get rid of all the bureaucracy, then everything will be more efficient. It's like, okay, you don't understand how governments work. That's fine. There's that thing that I think it's Felix, I can't remember, but one of the kind of ecosiphers always talks about, like, in capitalism, there is a sufficient requirement for bureaucracy to produce efficiency. And there's a tipping point where too much efficiency produces too much bureaucracy, and too much bureaucracy reduces efficiency. And this is such a moment of like imagine the next 2 days of the guys who have to fill out the paperwork to figure out what to do with this. Like, this is making more problems than it's solving. Like, if they just waited 2 hours, then, like, you know what I mean? Like, this is such a like it's and this episode is called Optics, right? And it's such a great little moment where people are filming on their phones and he's like, I said I'd take action and we're taking action, and it's he's obviously
which I thought was the entire point.
It is.
Like, I thought the entire point was what you just described, that it's going to blow up in his face in another episode or something.
Oh. Interesting. That hadn't occurred to me. Huh. I mean, it might do.
Because he's normally not wrong, right? So it would be really interesting for the audience to get to see him being so confident and taking charge, and like he did the Trump thing and it always worked before, but this time, no, we needed that dirt somewhere else, and now whatever.
Yeah, there might be like a news segment, like just for like 20 seconds in another episode later on, where it's like, oh, that bridge collapsed again amid like poorly constructed repairs and killed 3 people or whatever. Yeah.
Right. Yes, that's a good little detail that you'd sneak in there. Yeah. Then it's a very cool sequence, and we get Fisk the everyman, which is very funny. He lacks a certain charisma in this stunt that makes it feel so cold in a way that I just think is delightfully executed. Like, D'Onofrio brings a vacancy to Fisk in this season.
That's such a good way to put it. Because that reminds me of the end of the first episode where he says, "I love New York," and then he does like this like super strange smile, like if you can even call it a smile. But just the delivery of that line was so like, was there any emotion to that? Like,
yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's a kind of a reptilian. It's not even reptilian is like that's too much, because that sort of implies, because we've seen reptile Fisk before. We've seen season 1 Fisk is like full reptile mode, like just dead behind the eyes, like the ice cold blood running through his veins. This Fisk is like not quite here. And to your point, Pat, about like trying to escape your past, I think in not giving into any emotionality, I think he is trying to keep that door shut, because I think he knows if he opens that door, any of that emotionality, what else comes with that is the rage and that animalistic brutality that, has been within him ever since he picked up that hammer. Yeah.
He'd rather just not spar, as he put it with Matt Murdock. He just doesn't engage in anything that he had been in. And you could turn a new page.
I have a really weird rabbit hole.
Do it.
You could choose whether we actually go down it or not, but why is Fisk so dead set against vigilantes, aside from his personal vendetta against Daredevil? Because as we see in the White Tiger case, with Daredevil's history, there is example after example after example of vigilantes saving police officers. So the idea that the entire police force is against vigilantes doesn't make sense. And if Fisk is trying to get the support of the police, it seems like he would have gone in the opposite direction and said, we've seen how good vigilantes have been in helping the police. Let's give them our support. But he went the opposite way.
I mean, I have a pretty obvious, I don't think there's a rabbit hole necessarily. There's a pretty clear answer, right? Which is you have to, if you want to drive the kind of conservative popularist vehicle that Fisk is building, you need to produce an other. Right, the social is predicated on its exclusions. There's a reason why, Hitler thought it was really interesting that these Jewish people everywhere, and his mentor talked about it a lot with this passion. And you obviously, the really scary stuff happening in America, I think, is a really clear, pretty clearly emblematic of Fisk's maneuver here, which is I need to produce a villain for the city. And I think it's an oblique version of what he did in season 3 with putting Dex in the suit and having him go out and murder people. I think it's take number 2. It's run number 2 at, okay, it's if you live in a superhero-filled New York City, what's one of the types of people, what's one social group that you can other that's easy to other? Because they're always doing property damage and shit, right? Like, it kind of makes sense to me that you would pick the superheroes as the kind of people to make into your or cast, I guess, as the other that needs to be eradicated or deported, or however you want to think, incarcerated, whatever the verbs are that you think of when it comes to that kind of conservative fascism. But I do think that is probably the reason. And to your point about policing, I think that raises a bigger question for me, Darth, which is, yeah, what was his expectation with the police when he got into office? Like, what did he think this relationship was going to look like? You know what I mean? And
also, the superheroes are working outside of the system that he's trying to climb to the top of, and you know that's not that's unfair. If you've hustled your way to the top of the system, and then someone just like shortcuts their way around it, then that's it's going to cause some conflict.
It's also funny to think about, though, that he's talking so bad about the vigilantes, and yet there is like literal merch being sold for Hulk and Captain America. And
it's awesome.
So he's like, go after these guys. Don't go after these guys.
Exactly. I mean, that's how trivial it is, right? And that's how like vacant of ideology it is. It is literally it's literally trivial. It's like Daredevil and White Tiger are the problem. It's like, oh, all right, sure. Like, if you say so.
Hey, what's this merch? What merch?
In one of the like Avengers films, you see like the kids are holding up, like one of them has on an Iron Man mask. You know.
Oh, you just mean that the fact that like Fisk doesn't say anything about like those superheroes, but just focuses on the one in New York. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Because like vigilantes are all over the place, but he's just like, these three are bad. But all the rest, Spider-Man, he's cool. Spider-Man is right next to Daredevil. Shoot Daredevil. Spider-Man's cool.
Well, he does condemn Spider-Man as well in his speech.
That's true.
He says he condemns Punisher, Spider-Man, and Daredevil.
Oh, man.
Okay.
Because they're the New York superheroes.
I used a bad example, although I had a good point.
Yes. Made a good point.
I know what you mean, yeah.
You made a good point, Darth, but as any high school English teacher will tell you, if you choose the wrong evidence, you get points taken off, okay? That's a B plus for you on that one. Look, the kind of big a couple things to move us through this episode a little bit is, Matt takes on Hector's case. He just happens to be at the police station and he overhears these dudes tuning him up. And I talked about policing before, but boy, like, is it fascinating seeing this season of television, or this reboot of this show. Is it fascinating seeing it portray the police in this has such a keen understanding of the institutionalization that has occurred in these organizations like the NYPD in the wake of Floyd and the defund the police movement and stuff like that. It is such a like vivid portrait of, if not for Matt Murdock, like, to be honest with you, if not for Matt Murdock walking in and overhearing this, I don't know how long Hector like lives, to be honest. Like, he signs that confession and that's a blank check for these guys to kill him. Or he doesn't sign the confession and that's a blank check for these guys to kill him. It's so carnal in its imagining of what this institutionalization of this particular brand of the NYPD is going to be capable of. And, Gallo has produced an NYPD that has insulated itself again and again. It feels like a pattern of insulation that's happened over time, that where you get to this extremity. It's pretty great. I have a question.
It's kind of a double.
It is kind of a double. Yeah. But hey, that's okay.
What's your question?
My question, I've written in my notes in all caps. Fisk killed that dude. What the fuck? Who did Fisk kill? What was I talking about? It's around the BB Uric.
Yeah, it was like he's talking directly to her about her. Yeah,
Ben, who Fisk killed. Okay, that's right. Yeah, Jesus. Sometimes my notes are inscrutable, y'all. I thought that was such a like my stomach did that like thing when he started talking about Ben.
I had the same reaction.
I was like, oh my god, this guy is awful. Yeah.
Yeah.
She asks him about Vanessa.
And I like, you know, it's very obvious that like BB knows the details about Urich's death. And if you think about it, like, it wasn't a secret or anything. Like, everyone involved in that knew what happened. So he didn't cover his tracks very well.
Well, also, like, Ben's story got published and it didn't matter because Fisk, like, stepped into the light himself. If you remember the way that all happened, Ben wrote the expose on Fisk, like, exposing all of the fact that he killed his father and all of this criminality that he'd been doing. And then Fisk just stepped out of the light before the story came out and basically owned the narrative. It's like people also knew that he was that's why everyone knows he's a criminal, right? And even obviously the huge popularity around his release from prison in season 3 as he, you know, turns confidential informant, or I guess not so confidential informant, just the informant bit. Yeah, it's just really dire stuff. Some really dark decisions from these writers, and I'm here for it. Then we've got Fisk being him having this weird exchange with Gallo, and there's a couple of things that happen pretty quickly. So like, yeah, Fisk goes to the funeral, and Gallo tells him everything but basically fuck off. And I'll talk a little bit in a second about some of the details of what Gallo brings up, but the interstitial that we get between that is, turns out Heather's like an author, so she's sort of writing books about psychology and things like that, which I just thought was such an interesting choice. Like, just a really like a thing that I wouldn't have picked, and it feels very evocative and like specific, and because someone's going to write this comment if I don't say it, her book is called Live Without Fear, and Daredevil is the man without fear. You're welcome, Easter eggs, etc.
And then, yeah, but like there's like all of it is sort of pertinent to like the themes going on. Like, for example, she says, you know, and she says, it talks about like how we project personas of ourselves through masks or whatever. So again, like within the theme of like, you know, going backwards, I think it's, you know, setting up the idea of how like people have an innate character that, you know, they're trying to suppress in this season that, you know, is like not their true face.
Right.
And, you know, like you know, like trying to move on and become different people is like, that's progress that like is either false or like it is like the actual way to move on is by like, you know, pretending until it becomes real kind of thing, or is that all just bullshit and at some point like you're always going to revert back to who you were kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I also like there's that like kid who comes up and he's like, are you taking on new clients? He's like very clearly sort of like unstable, like on the precipice of something, and she's like, yeah, let me, you know, I can move things around. It's interesting how that's in this context, it's quite a heroic thing to do, as if you're like saving someone from doing something extreme, which, you know, like I think it's with the like American politics parallels that's going on here. I think that's, you know, like taking someone seriously and like, you know, showing concern for their mental health and stuff like that, and not, you know, stopping someone before they do something extreme, I think is like kind of, it's like vaguely pertinent here.
Yeah, it does. And at the risk of like saying the thing, I think sometimes it's difficult when you end up in these conversations about politics with people, because at the end of the day, you kind of drill down to this elemental thing, which is like, there's only so many ways I can explain to somebody why it's good to care about other people. And Heather is someone that just intrinsically cares about other people and understands why that is like a good thing to do. And like what value that brings to you as a society. And that just like truly existentially, it's just a good thing to do. Like it doesn't, there's no other output for her. And I think a different show, just to say the other thing, I think a different show with this exchange might frame this as, oh, this is like an unhinged fan, like, get the security to come over and eject him from the building type of thing. Yeah, there's a compassion that the writers have here that I think is pretty rare for how the scene is portrayed. I think compared to how other shows would deal with this type of character in this moment. Ostensibly a celebrity
part of the reason
coming up and do you know what I mean?
Part of the reason may be just to endear her to the audience so that we want to see her together with Matt. Whether or not that's ends up being true, there could be more to the story with the kid that she talks to. One thing that I did notice that I don't really know if it's a running theme or not is when you were talking about the book and why they had her like doing like a literal signing with a literal book, is the same thought that I had about the newspapers from the earlier seasons, when like you didn't need the paper, like everything could have been done on the internet, on a blog or whatever. But the show has a constant theme of physical print, whatever that means.
Yeah. I think that's probably right. I think it's also a both and scenario to what you pointed out before about like, is this painting her in a positive light so that it endears us to want her to be with Matt? I think it's that, and it's demonstrating that compassion Pat was talking about. Which I think is like just actually true, which is such a weird thing to be saying in a Daredevil TV show, that like this might be like a healthy pairing of two people. It just doesn't happen very often.
I think Elektra was
like
perfect.
sardonic.
I'm just saying.
Wow, we're getting an Elektra stand in the chat. Yeah, okay. They could have murdered people for the rest of their life and lived happily ever after.
He just needed to get over that hump. He just had a little bit of a problem.
The first one's hard, and then after that.
Sacrifice your mental health for those crazy girls.
Then we get Fisk going to the cop's funeral. We've kind of already said this, but we get another great little bit of like New York history where Gallo, I keep writing Galloway, it's not his name. Gallo talks about Samuel Vance, who was the shortest, in 1974, served for 1 month as mayor of New York. And Gallo's sort of vow is to make Fisk's term even shorter. And his parting line is just like mwah, where he says, I know who you are. You're a monster trying to rewrite his legacy, but guess what? Too late. Once a thug, always a thug. Like, fucking get him, dude. Like, yo, my man is out here spitting bars. Like, just, whew. You know what I'm saying?
But not really for the
As
right
we'll
reasons.
Yes.
As we'll see.
Yeah. It's a cool setup. And this sets up the primary conflict for Fisk in this episode, which is, how is he going to get Gallo on his side? What's his maneuver here? Yeah. Cool little exchange. Have you guys got anything on this, or should we talk about the mechanism that ends up kind of swallowing Hector whole, and how this all kind of starts to play out? So Cherrie,
for a change, Fisk was not the most interesting thing for a change. Like, I felt weird being like bored when he was on screen. I mean, he was like a huge part of why I loved the older seasons. So,
yeah, well, he's not himself yet. He is still this facsimile of Fisk, right? And I think we are going to start to see that. What Pat was talking about before, that kind of rubber band to the past is, I think, going to start tightening and snapping back, and we're going to start to see that person that you can't look away from, I think, will return as the show goes on. I hope. Because boy, do I like...
Or, maybe he's like Punisher and that bullet's stuck in his brain and now he's just a different person.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Because that's... Uh-huh. Yep. Anyway, we got to move on.
Because that's how biology works.
So Cherrie goes to the family with McDuffie, to the wife, and Cherrie starts pretty accurately describing the way that the cop's death starts this sort of machine that kind of cycles and cycles and cycles, looking for someone to punish, and it never stops until it finds someone to punish for this cop's death, because that is how this machine, once it's turned on, it can never be shut off. There's no off switch until it completes its task. And I don't know if Scarter Payne is necessarily a socialist. I don't know for sure what Scarter Payne's politics are, but fucking hell, my boy has read some books about technological determinism. Like, this was the most like, this writer understands how institutions become and produce ideology. Interesting. I just thought it was really apt. And, you know, it sketches the existential nature of this threat pretty clearly, as he's sort of telling this, describing this thing, for both us, the audience, but then of course for Hector's wife as well.
An NYPD cop is dead. And anytime that happens, a big machine gets turned on to try to figure out what went wrong and to punish whoever killed the cop. Punish them severely. And that machine has no off switch. It just goes and goes until somebody pays. But Matt Murdock and this woman here are the two best lawyers I've ever seen, so.
You know what's interesting is I think it's like a scene or two after this, but the judge for the trial, the first thing you see is them appearing at court and appealing for bail, and he just flat out denies it, like straight off the bat. And I think because he come off this scene with Cherrie espousing, basically, this institution is mildly corrupt or very corrupt, and then you get the sense of like, oh, is it going to extend to the courts as well, which turns out not to be the case. But like, I feel like, I don't know, placing those two scenes like very close to each other gives you like this dread of like, oh, is everything like going to be rigged?
Yeah,
at least that's what it felt like to me. Yeah,
and almost everything is. It is. They come this close to complete disaster because everything is rigged against them. Yeah. Darth, you didn't make a face when I talked about technological determinism, so I assume that you were just letting that one slide.
No, I was going to say that I had the same reaction as you, but I used much, much smaller words.
The duality of man, Darth.
Because when he said that line about just looking for someone to blame, and I was like, yes, that happens all the time in like so many different areas of my life that I've noticed, and like people are trying to find a scapegoat, and I'm like, look at the problem. We got to solve the problem. It doesn't matter who caused the problem. Anyway. And
yep.
Now there's like these 8-syllable words I have to learn so I can figure out what we're talking about.
Yeah, give me 10 years and you'll have read some Marx. We'll get there. I do want to do it for Patreon at some point. I definitely want to read through Postmodernism with you, Darth. I think you'll find that to be a truly compelling book. That's Jameson, the writer, not the whiskey. And yeah, definitely use some Marx and stuff like that. Yeah, be good. This is where we learn that Hector is White Tiger. I had the same note that Darth did earlier. Hector has an amulet that gives him powers? ? It's just, it's,
okay,
you know what?
We learned this when Cherrie is going and snooping in his room, right?
Yeah. Yeah, he finds the outfit under the bed.
Okay, I don't know if this is like CinemaSins or if this is just like a rough plot point, but why are they secretly investigating his client?
So like Matt tells Cherrie, on the off chance he's lying to us, I need you to invest. No, that's not what happens. Matt says he's hiding something, right? Like he's telling the truth about what happened.
He says he's telling the truth, but something doesn't add up.
Yeah.
Is basically, yeah.
And so he's basically
like, Cherrie, find out what that is.
Yeah.
I guess the whole scene just came off like really cliche to me because he's like, "There's a secret. Go find out what the secret is." And then the secret costume is just like in an open box under the bed, which he finds in like 10 seconds. And
I mean,
the whole point of that
also,
scene was just to
What and also his wife is just like, oh yeah, go into his bedroom and like in person
where his
just
costume
go
is.
find his suit. Yeah.
Yeah.
To be fair and balanced and even-handed, because I don't want to get the comment that's like this is cinema sins. To be fair and balanced, how often, if like there are things in your home that you would not think to hide on a normal basis because who is in your home looking at that? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, if I had that superhero costume, no one's okay. If I'm expecting people to come to my apartment, maybe I put it in like a cupboard where it's out of sight. But like, he didn't have time to come home and clean up. She's in a bit of, she's clearly in a fucking headspace about it all because it's all like, I don't know. It is cliche, but also like I can rationalize it in my head to make it not a problem,
Mm-hmm. See, just leave your Bad Dragon collection out on the shelf.
Exactly.
There's nothing to hide.
It was the same with the opening fight, actually, that there's stuff that I just let go, but I think could have been done, like, tweaked just to be slightly better. This scene was one of them. But the living cop not shooting him after his partner gets killed, he, like, arrests him. And then the whole rest of the story is about trying to kill him to cover up what happened. So if he wanted to kill him, he should have done it there where there were no witnesses. So add in witnesses that see the very end of the fight. They see him accidentally kill the cop, and now the remaining cop, can't kill him outright because there's witnesses. So like just a little tweak, and then tweak this scene just a little bit for how they find the suit. Like, what if the wife came and gave him up because she thinks that will help his case? Like, that could have been way more interesting and put a little bit of tension between he and his wife. I don't know.
I kind of dig that. Like, yeah, his wife, like, kind of, a mix of emotions, concern and they're fighting. It just reveals that he's the white tiger to Matt or something. That could have worked, I reckon.
Yeah. Instead, we kind of we kind of move from that little reveal into the police commissioner going to Fisk's office to resign. Fisk does a bit of theater involving cheesesteaks, which, hey, we've all done it. And
Fisk's theater is like so funny.
And he sort of it's all this elaborate mechanism for him to not have to say out loud that he's blackmailing this dude, and he it's extremely funny. So he tells us a little anecdote about like cheesesteaks in Philly, and then he's found some in the city, and he kind of lifts up the wrapper, and there's a photo of Gallo's secret kid ? The details don't matter. The important thing is he's got dirt on this guy, and he removes overtime minimums, and guts an expanded cadet class, and then forces this guy to stay employed as the police commissioner. It's such a like shitty, like, this is every boss that you've had in a shitty job that like you ask for something as fundamental as like, it's a bad economy right now. I could just use an extra couple bucks a week or some more time off to do this. And then they punish you for it for like the next 3 months in like little tiny annoying ways. This is this boss to a T. Yeah, it's great.
Which is funny because if he was wanting to convince the commissioner that he was reformed, he could have been like, all I want you to do is stay and do your job and help with the police. But he went like overly heavy-handed with it, and now it's like super obvious to the commissioner that yes, this is a bad guy and he is out to do bad things and hurt people, and he's gutting our funding and all this other stuff.
I think it was probably equally about bringing the commissioner down, because he's like, what are you like, admonishing me for? You've got a secret kid, like you're not better than me, kind of thing.
Plus, like, I think you just have to sometimes be like, there's some guys that you're not going to win, right? Some guys you're not going to win over. Like, you're just too fundamentally different sometimes. That's something else I sort of think.
Yeah, which was another interesting thought that because didn't the commissioner say like a whole bunch of the police force was going to resign along with him?
Yeah,
isn't that what he said?
Yeah.
And I started to say let them go, like those are the people not loyal to Fisk. So then he hires more cops that are loyal to him. That would have been his like best play.
The optics on that, like this guy is a criminal. He becomes the mayor, and then half the police force resign. Like that's a story that's hard to get away from. Like. I think the idea, and as to whether it works or not, I think your mileage is going to vary as always, right? I'm not trying to tell you how to think or feel about it, but I think part of it is trying to demonstrate how few options Fisk has and how actually tenuous his position is right now, right? Like he doesn't try that maneuver because too much could go wrong with that maneuver. He's making very safe plays right now in some ways is my kind of feeling, or that's at least how I.
So that would.
You know.
But that would have been the move of old Fisk, because I felt that deeply. Like that's what Fisk would have done, in the past.
Or or he would have gone and got dirt on like the remaining police that didn't resign and like flipped them on, or delay. Yeah, you're right. I see what you're saying. Yeah. I don't know. It's just such a. It feels like a very gormless move from Fisk in some ways. Like it's a very sort of like he just kind of blackmails the dude. He's like, you stick around for the transition. Like it's a very nothing threat as well. I don't know. There's something about it that feels very pedestrian that I can't quite put my finger on. Maybe that's what you said, Darth, is that a different previous version of Fisk would have done something very different and much more dramatic and existential.
Maybe part of it also is that we don't know enough about I've been saying commissioner, is that right? Or is it the captain?
Yes, police commissioner. Gallo.
Okay, so we don't know enough about him to know that he's like a super dedicated family man or something. So like the fact that he has a secret kid, we're like, so a lot of people do. I mean, that's like half of the story of Game of Thrones. So what?
Yeah, that's a good point. Actually, yeah, that you make a good point. Yeah, it does kind of make you go, so well. Yeah, because the point of it is the threat, not the, like I was saying before, like the point is the blackmail, not the contents of the blackmail, right? Yeah. Just interesting choices.
And the really funny ending bit of that whole thing is like him spitting out the sub after the commissioner leaves because he's like, that was terrible.
It's so funny. He puts himself through. Keep in mind, right? This is a Fisk who has like been dieting. He's been fastidious about what he's eating, right? He's on his health kick. Okay, my man's is doing keto, and he has to like for this stunt that frankly wasn't necessary to sell this threat. He eats part of this cheesesteak he doesn't like. It's so funny.
Well, yeah, I mean, maybe that is like the fact where he says, this is disgusting. Like the banality of this threat compared to, how he was before. Like, I think, and he's just, self-aware that like, oh man, like, look how far I've dropped in like, being kingpin kind of thing. Like this is where I'm at right now.
Yeah,
but it's a necessary thing. Yeah,
he's like, it's like a kid literally having to like finally eat their vegetables type of thing. It's I like that Darth grinned at that because I know this motherfucker was like a kid that didn't like vegetables. I know that for I don't. You've never told me that, but I know that for an existential fact about you that you would have been difficult about vegetables as a kid.
I absolutely loved broccoli covered with cheese.
Okay, that's like kind of almost normal, sort of.
Yeah, but it takes away all of the health.
Yeah, look, you're still getting the nutrition, Darth. That's what matters, okay? You're getting the fiber, you get the nutrition.
I've gotten better I'm better in my old age. I have salads. I had baby carrots with my dinner.
Excellent.
Yeah. Yes, and then I only had like half a cake for dessert. So,
and I'm pretty sure the baby carrots cancel out the cake. Is that? I'm not a nutritionist.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure nutrition is a plus and minus calculation.
Hey, you just solve for X, right? Yeah. Until it's 0.
Yeah.
Just got to keep everything equal.
Yeah, life's all about balance, y'all. That's very funny. Matt. Okay, so the kind of way this episode closes out is Matt goes to the judge. Obviously, we've already talked about the fact that like during the arraignment, bail is denied just categorically. It's a pretty brutal scene. So then Matt goes to the judge, knowing the white tiger details, and gets it suppressed. This will be ironic later. Matt and Cherrie then meet on the same shore where Ben and Karen used to meet in season 1. I was like, yes, good. Like, just it does nothing for the story. It's just brilliant texture. And the reason why this fucking happens is Matt is thinking about who he used to be and, like you were saying, Pat, like the past and trying to escape the past. And it's this little moment of reminiscence where he goes and he stands there and they have this conversation. And it's with Cherrie, who knows he's Daredevil. He knows the man that Matt used to be. It's very potent. It's pregnant with meaning, but it doesn't have to say anything. It's a very a very nice bit of imagery that speaks for itself and doesn't necessarily. This isn't like a metaphor. It's just pregnant with meaning that you can then read. That decision however you want, or if you don't know the details, it's just a good scene. I don't know. Dude,
I mean, the subject of the scene is about like moving forward and denying that you're going backwards while in a location that's like that's meant to like give you some nostalgia for the old show.
Yeah. Did you have that similar feeling, Pat? Like, first of all, did you pick up on it?
On what? Sorry.
On the fact that this is like that's the same location from.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, yeah, I did. I was like, I was like 90% sure. I was like, yeah.
Yeah. I had to go do some Reddit. I had to go on Reddit to confirm this, which was unfortunate. Dear listener, never go on Reddit. Okay, I had to do it as a professional. It was it was part of my job for this podcast. Don't try this at home. Don't go on Reddit by yourself, unsupervised. But yes, I did confirm it.
Was that the same location that Karen threw the gun? I'd always assumed it was.
Possibly. I don't remember.
And if that's true, was that the last time that we ever saw that bit of shoreline? Was when Karen threw the gun? Because then it might, coming back, would reference that and not necessarily the Uric stuff.
I think she met there with Ellison a few times.
Yeah, you're right. Because that's... Yes,
you're right.
Yes, you're right.
Okay.
But also, the reason why she ends up in the position with the gun to kill Wesley is because she keeps pursuing the story with Uric, even when Matt is like, Karen, stop it. You need to stop doing this. And she can't not do it. And even Ben is like, Karen, leave the case alone. And she pushes him and pushes him and pushes him. And that's what gets him killed, which is what gets her in the position where she's embroiled enough that Wesley figures out who she is. That, it all just cascades together. That first domino of meeting Ben at that shoreline, small domino, meet Ben at shoreline, big domino, shoot James Wesley in chest 7 times. You get it. That's how literary analysis works. It's a great detail. Matt goes back to he sort of goes back to a church and he's touching this pillar, and initially I'm like, what is this scene? And it turns out that he's tracking the dead cop's partner. Did you have this guy's name, Pat? You said it before.
Shanahan.
Oh
no, sorry.
No.
That's the one who died.
Yeah. I did write it down. I just don't. I don't have it.
Began with a K.
Did it?
Did it?
I don't know. Anyway, he tracks the dead cop's partner. While this is happening concurrently, in all caps in my notes simply reads, "No, Heather is Fisk and Vanessa's marriage counselor. Why won't this show stop hurting me?" It's like this decision is so good it made me angry. I was like, fuck, I wish I thought of something like this. Like when I'm writing. This is like, I don't know about you guys.
You know what? you know what's funny is I was thinking this is something I would write. It's like a way to connect everything. Obsessively. It's like, yeah, they can. She can be their marriage counselor.
And it makes sense. She just published a book, so she'd be in the news and stuff like that. It all clicks into place.
And that's why his lackey was at the signing. And I was like, oh,
he was vetting her. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Huh.
So what is the line with something being too coincidental so that it comes off as like cliche and stupid? Because I had that thought, and I was like, the only like therapist that we've met this entire show is of course the one that's gonna both date Matt and be the therapist for his adversary. It works, but what is the line for where it doesn't work?
I think it depends thing to thing in my experience. Like, it really depends story to story. I think the usual thing for me, and this is probably more of a contemporary literary theory thing than anything else, is it's about how that coincidence occurs, right? What is the thing that pushes that coincidence into being? Now, if you think about it, life is pure entropy, and everything is a coincidence. But when in storytelling, we're talking about things logically following each other, right? Rye always talks about stories that feel coherent is when thing A happens, and because of thing A, thing B happens, and then characters need to make a decision on thing B, which causes thing C. I think the reason why this works for me here in a way that it might not in other stories is it logically follows that Vanessa is not in Fisk's life in a big way. It's an optics problem for him now that he's mayor, right? And so therefore he has to make a choice about that. And the choice he's forced to make about that is go and do marriage counseling to get her back on Team Fisk. And the best way to do that, to go and get someone back on Team Fisk, is to go and find someone who we know is good at the damn thing. Who do we know that's good at the damn thing? Who's good at dealing with past stuff like what Pat talked about with her book? It's Heather. Therefore, we choose Heather, the assistant, whatever the British guy, whose name I don't know yet, one of Fisk's aides, who works for him, who's ostensibly the new Wesley. He goes and recruits Heather and, brings her inside Team Fisk, gets her to sign the NDA. And like even though the individual person is a massive coincidence that happens to be Heather, it logically follows in the story that it would end up being her, and that it could have been anybody. I think that's the difference is, even though she's the only therapist we've met, this could easily have been any therapist that happened to have a similar profile in the public space as Heather. It's not because she's dating Matt. You know what I mean? Like, there's something about it that still works for me. I don't know.
Well, I was just really excited because that's gonna later on there's gonna be some idea that incepts its way into what's her name?
Who?
The therapist?
Heather,
yeah. There's going to be something from Fisk and Vanessa's, counseling sessions that incepts its way into Heather's mind that she brings up with Matt at home, and it's going to cause some tensions. Like, there's some juicy stuff in the future, and that's what immediately where my mind went. And I went, oh yes, I'm all for this.
Yeah.
I don't know if they'd actually go this far because it is a little bit weird, but Matt would totally be able to smell Fisk on her.
Like a dog.
Yeah.
Wait, have you been talking to my enemies?
It's the lipstick on the collar of this relationship. Oh my god, that is so funny to me.
No, but like a really small tweak that would, like if there was a significant problem that I had with that, coincidence, quote unquote coincidence, you could just have Fisk and Vanessa go to that firm. Like, they know this therapist firm is the best one, and they get partnered up with this therapist, and then they're like, oh no, they had to call out today. This is our absolute next best choice, and it's Heather. So then it's like, it's still a coincidence, but it wasn't, it was an accident, like overtly an accident that they got partnered up with her, versus now it's like the story is like, you have to you have to be partnered up with the hero's, romantic interest.
I see. Yeah, I could see that remedying that a little bit more. The other thing is, just to be honest with you, is this a coincidence? We don't know how much Fisk's new Wesley knows, right? Does he specifically choose Heather because she's dating Matt, right? Like, we actually don't have an answer to that yet. So it may not be. This might be something that untangles later, right?
Yeah, I wondered that.
Yeah. God, this show's so good. I love this bizarre therapy. The vibe, guys, in this therapy room with Vanessa and Fisk is so bizarre and cursed, and I hate it and I love it. Yeah, it's great. And then we get the big climax to this episode, which is our first kind of.
Wait, can I?
Yeah, go.
Can I talk about the? Yeah, so I mean, I just want to say this is where I picked up on that theme of losing progress and going backwards, because, I think what Vanessa talks about, like, she talks about how, she took over the business when, Wilson left, and she was, thriving and prospering, and yes, something was missing, but she was in a flow, she was, and I think she says something along the lines of how she was like sort of discovering herself, discovering her potential, and then Wilson came back and unbalanced everything, so it confuses her sense of progress, quote unquote, like emotional, psychological progress. And then similarly with Matt, it's drawing the parallel, it's like he feels himself slipping into his old ways, his anger is coming back and his personal life fell apart, all this familiar rhythm. So yeah, I think that's what this episode's going for, and of course that like crescendos with this ending, which we're about to go into.
Does that really work for her character looking all the way back? Because it makes it sound like she was not successful and happy until she was a crime boss, but her very introduction, she was confident and she was influential and she was the curator of this incredibly expensive art gallery, and it's like she knew who she was and she liked who she was, and then it's like becoming the crime boss like took that away and replaced it with something else. You know what I'm trying to say?
I don't know if she necessarily was like super fulfilled before she met Wilson. I think in the show, like it's been a minute, but I feel like there is some parts where she talks about how, like, Wilson coming into her life and everything that his life brought with him was like, it sort of, it brought something that she was missing, more or less. It's kind of what I remember. But and then in season 3, when Wilson won't let her into his life, and when she's been sort of put in the back seat for a long time, it's like that is what really gets her, is that she's like, she has this life like of excitement dangled in front of her, but she Fisk won't let her in, kind of thing. And then yeah.
Thoughts, David?
I think Pat is on to the way that I think about this. I think there's another element, which is I also think once she has a taste of this life, I think, there's that saying of like, you don't know what you don't know until you know, right? Like, you don't know what you don't know until you know enough to realize, like, it's that I think they talk about that in like mastery stuff. I'm sure it's all Lacanian nonsense, but or Young or someone, but there's a kind of there's some threshold where, like, like if you're learning guitar, you don't know anything about guitar, and you learn enough about guitar to do a little bit of guitar, and you suddenly realize how much you don't know about guitar. I think for Vanessa, when she crosses that threshold with Fisk and his criminal empire, I think she starts to see, like, whoa, like the world is a lot bigger than I thought it was, and there is a lot more out there than I thought there was that I can achieve. I think perhaps that's the way I read her difficulty here. Is this Fisk returning feels like it feels like it's closing and narrowing the world for her in a way that she was able to completely access the world while he was away, is sort of my feeling. Yeah, so I think it is that
like
she didn't realize she wasn't fulfilled until she met Wilson, and then she met Wilson, had that relationship, took over his empire, produced a new kind of fulfillment, and now that is being threatened by his return.
I think she was probably like surprised by her adaptability, and gave her a confidence like that she didn't know she had, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And like, as you say, Darth, like at the beginning of this show, you see her like super confident and competent managing, as she puts it, the relationship between management and labor. It was thriving.
I think there's also a just to be honest with you, a type of woman who marries a powerful man, is in that relationship, and it's when that relationship decays and ends that they suddenly realize what they're capable of. And they are able to completely accelerate their life in different vectors that weren't possible before. It's sort of a recurring motif with people who end up married to, like, it's in Station 11, which I've been rereading, there's a character who ends up marrying like one of the world's most famous actors, and it's not until they get divorced that she goes on to become like an executive at like a shipping company. Like, she's able to like completely change her life. And that's only possible because she had this narrowing at one point that then opened up again. I think Vanessa's in a very similar position. Yeah, that's kind of my feeling anyway.
It is really interesting to think that the man that she fell in love with is not this same person anymore, on many different levels. And is it okay for her to not love him anymore?
Right. Yeah, well, and I think that's the big question of these two characters for this season, right? Like, because if he gives in to that and he goes back to being the old Fisk, who's going to be standing right next to him, tapping him on the shoulder? It's fucking Daredevil, right? Like, it's such a, but like, if he doesn't, he's going to lose his wife, right? Like, it's an impossible position for him to be in. And I guess I'm curious to see how he navigates it. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think what is wrong between Vanessa and Fisk is still quite vague. Like, I don't think it's just a matter of like, oh, Fisk went from the kingpin to the mayor, and he's like, I don't know, he's more emollient now or something. I don't think that's what Vanessa thinks she's missing. I think it's something a bit more like nuanced, like. I don't know what. I don't know what exactly. He doesn't have the same energy and like vigor that he brought to love, that he, or the way he expressed love when he was a gangster on top of the world is so much different now that he's a legit politician. It's all about optics, right? And it's, you've got to behave a certain way, and sometimes that doesn't like meet the criteria for an exciting and passionate relationship, but maybe
because previously he was driven by his passions. I say that in like the dramatic sense of the word passions. Driven by his passions regardless of how it looked, right? It's almost like a complete flip of that order position. So sorry, Darth, I cut you off.
Yes, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, and she's one of those things that he's no longer passionate about, because there was this whole bit where she's feeling guilty about cheating on him with Sam? I don't remember what the dude's name was.
Adam?
Okay. So, and like 2 times in like different scenes, Fisk is like, I know about him and I forgive you, or something like that. Which like old Fisk never would have done. He would have like ripped the dude's skin off.
Yeah, totally.
And so she's like, that passion isn't there, and she's like, oh, you must not love me anymore because you're not jealously defending me or something.
And I think this is why I'm so excited for more of these therapy sessions. I want to know what the deal is, and I want these characters to figure it out, because I don't think they fully know either, right? Like, to be honest with you, I don't think Vanessa fully knows what her problem is, just that something is wrong. Yeah. Which is, just to be honest with you, like, there's some relationships like that. Yeah. What, Darth?
I was just going to be like, I was gonna be like, everyone just needs to tag him on Twitter right now and be like, he just said women don't know what their problem is. They don't know what's wrong.
Just blow up my blue sky, like a misogynist.
Yeah. David reckons women need someone to tell them what to think.
Yeah, wow. Exactly. Wow. Well, speaking of men behaving badly, Matt tracks the cop and figures out that they are going to kill the witness from the subway platform, Nickey. They're just going to kill him straight up. And I want to point out this detail because it's going to be important next episode. And I understand how television's written, so if I don't say it, people may not pick up on it, but this cop has a Punisher tattoo. This show's understanding of how fucking corny police are is beautiful. How shitty it understands police to be. Just the douchiest cops of all time. Do you guys remember this in like this would have been like 2018-ish, 2019, when there were all those cops that put like Punisher decals on their police cruisers? Do you guys remember this? Yeah.
I could see it. It doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, the same type of like amorphous, gormless douchery, like just the corniest motherfuckers. I love it. And I love that they're using it as like a mechanism to show us that there's some kind of sub-network within the police. Because we get a tattoo in the next episode of, you know, there's a conversation, it's during the trial, and someone leans over and is like, "Dad, we got to blah, blah." And they have on the Punisher tattoo on their neck. So that, you know, there's some graffiti later. Like, they're doing something with this, as well as really perfectly capturing how shitty cops are. I love it. It's good.
Almost like it's a cult. Oh, another one for the Patrick bingo card.
Tick.
No, I'm kidding.
Tick.
Your cult was way cooler, though. I gotta say, the cult of Thanos is that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I do like that idea.
I think what I like
also is.
You go, Dolph.
What you had said earlier about the tattoo thing was the fact that Matt has no idea. Like in these scenes, he's there, and the audience sees it, but he doesn't.
Oh, what the fuck? That's awesome. That is so good.
You said it.
That's something I was wondering too, because like the camera clearly like shows it. I'm like, he can't hear ink. Like I wonder. Yeah, like.
That is such a good point. Like, that is a detail I would not have picked up on. Damn. Well, this scene predictably goes bad. So he gets Nickey out the window, like down the fire escape, where Cherrie's going to pick him up. And then these guys start, you know, he basically steps in their way. They beat him down. And it's when they pull a gun. He puts it to Matt's head, and Matt just explodes. Like, I think there's maybe 4 bits of action choreography in this sequence after that gun is pulled. And it's just him brutalizing the crap out of these guys. Like, he drops them so fucking fast. And, you know, and then to pat your point before, just being a bit more like kind of poppy or there's a different tone here. He's kind of hollering, and his holler bleeds perfectly into the vines as the song kicks in. And my note simply reads, "Fuck, what a great episode. We're ending with the vines. Are you kidding me? They're making a TV show for me and nobody else." It was such a...
I've written a cheeky, in quotes, "We all know where the show is going. We want the violence," and it was awesome.
So good.
Is what I wrote.
He punches that guy's arm, elbow the wrong way. It's like, God, it's awesome. And Darth, I know you're more keyed into action choreography than we are. Does this sequence work for you?
Ironically, there's one bit that doesn't work because they did it too. He takes the one guy and he bashes his head against the fridge in a way that his neck does like this, and I'm like, oh, he just killed him. He just killed a cop. And I'm like, that ties in so perfectly with this whole thing with Hector, who didn't kill a cop, and now Matt did, but in self-defense. But then that wasn't what happened at all.
That's funny. Yeah.
Yeah.
It'd be very funny if it turned out that the plot twist here was that Matt killed the cop. Be a very different show.
But I adored the way that he's standing there in the middle of the locked room holding his cane, and he's like, my client is not here, or whatever he says. And it was so beautiful. And then they're like, oh, we got to beat up the blind guy because maybe he knows something. Maybe he saw where the guy went. And Matt's like, are you an idiot? No, I didn't see where he went.
Yeah, I think there's something like comic about this scene is exactly what you're talking about. Like the fact that like they decide to kill Matt. You know, Matt's just letting them beat on him because he's like, okay, they'll beat on me and then they'll go away because you know that's why else would they do? Why would they do anything else? And then it's just, and then when they pull out the gun, he's like, no, come on, please don't do this. Like it's not necessary. And then you know he has to do what he has to do. And because of that, you know, he's forced to slip back into Daredevil, and that makes him quite irritated. To say the least.
Yes, he gets a bit miffed.
Yeah.
I think the writing of this sequence understands something about the mechanisms around these police, right? Once that first punch is thrown, right? This is opposing counsel, and he just caught them witness tampering. Once that first punch is thrown, they are gonna kill him. They haven't decided it yet. They haven't made that decision when that first punch is thrown. But the second they hit him, this can't go any other way than they kill this guy. Because the small domino of punching this guy and him living to tell the tale of what happened, that's not just this cop's career is over. That's like exposing whatever this network is that's going on. The case is getting thrown out. It's an embarrassment to the police force. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, there's a kind of there's a brilliant way that this understands. Like, this first act of violence means that they will come to the decision to kill him. It's not arbitrary. Like, you know, they as they're beating him up and the guy pulls the gun, it is the logical conclusion. This is always going to end that way. The second that first punch is thrown. Do you know what I mean?
Hmm. Yeah, it's just, I don't know. I'm just imagining like they shoot him and someone hears the gunshot and say, "What's that?" And then they shoot the person who comes in and investigates the gunshot. It's like,
yeah. Either
way, it's not a very well thought out plan.
Exactly. Yeah. Where does it end?
Yeah.
That's like a Naked Gun parody or something where they just have to go through and just kill the entire building full of people.
And then they have to go back and they have to find like the person that sold the gun and kill him. Go find the manufacturer, kill them. Find the designer. Yeah, like you know, you can imagine that. But yeah, great episode of TV. Anything else on episode 2, or should we take a quick break and then talk about episode 3?
I also adored the ending. You both said it, but the fact that he just ends the episode screaming, "I was trying to play nice."
I know. He's like, I did the right thing.
Like his glass is broken.
Yeah. God, television's back, you guys. All right, we're gonna take a quick break. We'll be back to talk about episode 3. Catch you presently. This season of Daredevil in the Details is brought to you by the Maynard Trigg series. These are my Dying Earth science fantasy steampunk coming of age novels. The 3rd book is out now. You can grab the first book, Maynard Trigg and the Creature Beneath the Veil, hardback or paperback. It's on special right now at underink.press. Appreciate any support you guys give. These books are one of my favorite things I've ever done. I'm super proud of them, and I would love you guys to check it out. If you're interested in the stuff we do, I guarantee you'll enjoy these books. Head to underink.press and grab your copy today. Welcome back. We are talking about episode 3, Hollow of His Hand, directed by Michael Kuster and written by Jill Blankenship. Patrick, could we please hear the summary?
This is a really brief summary. Okay. Hector's trial has arrived. Fisk and Vanessa broach their awkward relationship. Matt deals with the fallout of the previous night's fistfight. We follow Hector's trial as both the guilty cop and Matt's star witness Torres lie about what happened the night on the subway in fear of reprisal. Matt is forced to pivot, and against McDuffie's advice, Matt reveals Hector is the White Tiger. Ultimately, this episode is a protracted episode of Better Call Saul, as Matt is forced to lean on raw emotionality to win the case. Hector is found not guilty on all 3 charges. Yet Fisk puts the word out via BB Urich, and someone in a Punisher jacket punches a bullet through Hector's skull. The rule of law must prevail after all.
It's an episode where not a lot happens, but a lot like Mad Men, it's about how it happened. Great law procedural episode, just some really good, this stuff that we love to see, people being good at their jobs, and struggling against the system. I have written down, this is where I had the note, like, this podcast is going to become me reading this entire script at a certain point. I've written down so much of the dialogue from this episode. It is so specific and interesting and evocative. This is maybe my favorite episode so far, I think. Yeah, it's just phenomenal. We start with Hector's speech, so he's sort of in holding. And this is really where they want to paint a picture of who this guy is, right? We've seen him step out of his way to help somebody, but this is the first time we really get a sense for like the person. He starts telling this little story. Do either of you have the little story here written down?
Nope.
Just talking about the frogs in the island.
Yeah, he has this little speech where he's sort of sitting there and he's clearly deep in thought. And he's saying to Matt, he says, Luquillo is a beach near where I'm from in Puerto Rico. To me, it's the most beautiful place on earth.
White sand, palm trees, and the coquis. This little tree frog doesn't croak, it sings its name. I laugh because the tourists, man, they think it's noisy and annoying, but to us Boricuas, man, it's a magical sound. And the coquis, it mates for life, right? So every sunset, thousands of these frogs start calling out to the one and only love. It's the music of the island.
Just so beautiful and so evocative, and like, if that doesn't give you goosebumps, I don't know what's wrong with you. It's such a beautiful portrait of a man. Like, you know, he has this doomed vision of, you know, this perfect place that he's never going to go back to, and I think he knows that. You know, of course, Matt sort of says, you know, you'll see that again someday. You'll see your family again. But yeah, it really tells us a lot about this guy and the way he values where he's from, and the way he differentiates himself from the tourists. It's such a beautiful character note, and it's the kind of thing. These decisions in the writer's room are the kind of things I associate with the original Daredevil series, to be honest with you. It's very of a piece with that. You know, a character sits down and says something about themselves.
Yeah, it's like Frank talking about the carousel ride. How him and his family used to go picnic at the park and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, I couldn't get past the image of whistling frogs. That is so strange to me, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, boy, this was where I knew this guy was fucked. Like, the second that I was like, oh, that's really beautiful. I was like, oh, this guy's so dead. Like,
delivers a poignant speech. Yeah, he's like, oh, he's gone.
Yeah, I've seen Daredevil before. I know how this works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ironically, I didn't think he was gonna get killed. I just thought, oh, he's definitely gonna lose the case now and wind up in jail forever. Like, that's where I thought it was gonna go, because they told a beautiful story.
Yeah, about freedom and stuff. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, it's rough. We get the next thing we kind of go to is sort of an interstitial with truly the most Scarter Payne Irish character of all time. Scarter Payne loves writing these Irish like mobster guys. You obviously got that in Daredevil season 2 with the head of the Irish mob that comes back into Hell's Kitchen, and he has that big beautiful speech, and then he just the entire place is shot up by Frank. It's a classic thing that Scarpane loves to do. And they basically they are fleecing these guys driving a truck. Presumably they want whatever the contents are. And the other guy won't give over his wallet, and then the Irish guy goes, he goes, "You're a hard man, are you? You stupid wee bastard," and he shoots the both of them. Just like, I don't know, Scarpane has a real eye for the Irish writing and the accents. It's fantastic. And then we and so this sort of sets up the dynamic of the episode that Fisk is dealing with, and that Vanessa is also dealing with, which is the criminal empire sort of seems to be falling apart a little bit. Fisk and Vanessa are having this awkward meal where she's like, this is what this is what happens when I'm not there. Like, they just, there's no one. If there's no one in the seat, then they just think there's all this, infighting and stuff like that. And Fisk delivers a little bit of a classic Fisk soliloquy where he goes, "They're rats at the bottom of the barrel. Let them kill each other." Vanessa comes back with, "When they're done with each other, whoever is left standing will come after you." Fisk says, "That world, that kind of violence, petty blood feuds, none of it is our concern."
Mm-hmm. He's aiming for higher goals, apparently.
Yeah, loftier ambitions.
We don't know what that is yet. But I mean, that's in line with like his behavior so far. There's this blank, vacant Fisk that we've been talking about. Like he's trying to quell like his entire character in the pursuit of something grander supposedly than anything we've seen earlier.
Yeah.
Wasn't there another line in there? I think there was a line that was like he wanted them to go to war because that would somehow be good for his political career. At least that was the inference, that it would be good for him if there was a war going on.
I think that's like a couple scenes later where he says, "Sometimes chaos must reign for a stronger order."
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's sort of I don't know what he thinks is going to happen here, like without their supervision. But like I just don't know if he's thought this through, right? I think he, like to your point, Pat, he's very focused on this other thing, and we just don't know what that is yet. And neither does Vanessa, it seems like. And so I think that's probably part of the tension, is like she can't quite square, like, why are we doing, like, what is the outcome here? Also, I have a question. We've had a few shots in a couple episodes here showing Fisk's knuckles that they seem, I can't tell if they're bruised or scarred. Do we know what happened there? Like, did he punch somebody at some point that I've forgotten about? Like,
yeah, I mean, this is exactly what I was thinking too. Like, because I definitely don't think we've seen him in this show beat on anyone. But they do look kind of recent. So, yeah,
but
it's
not
like,
not super recent though. They were they were healing over.
Yeah.
So like before this, like just the start of episode 1, like where he entered the room and dismissed all the gang members. Like something happened prior to that. Like, where did he come from?
Right. Okay. No, I was just I'm glad that we don't know, because I was like, if I missed that, that's super embarrassing.
I have such a really weird little bit of tidbit information, because if I'm correct, all 4 of his knuckles were bloody. Does that ring a bell? Or not
Maybe
bloody, but like scabbed or whatever.
I couldn't tell you, but perhaps, yeah.
Because I in my brain I was like, that's not right, unless they did it intentionally, because Fisk never fights quote unquote properly, because he just wails on people. But like, if you're a trained fighter, you're only hitting with the first 2 knuckles, because that's the strongest point. You don't want to hit with these last 2, because those are the ones that you'll normally break, because they don't have the force of your bones right behind them. So if they had done it with a trained fighter like Matt, then assumedly you would only see the first 2 knuckles scabbed over and not the last 2.
There you go. That's the kind of detail you don't get anywhere else. I mean, Fisk when he fights is just like swinging those things like they're bricks. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I was like, it's probably in character for him.
Totally.
But anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. The kind of thing that no one else is going to pick up on. So there you go.
Boom. Easter egg, motherfucker.
Where I thought you were initially going with that was like, he's I don't know, like taking boxing lessons or something, and like as if he's learned to punch properly. But then you said that the opposite.
I mean, that could be part of it, is that because we don't know why the camera is showing us that. So it could be that he's literally taking like boxing classes or something.
Yeah.
We don't
It
know.
would make sense if he has that anger that he needs to get out somewhere. Yeah.
And he keeps getting his ass kicked by people who do know how to fight. So
Yeah.
he's like, you know what? Maybe I should learn how to fight.
I'm gonna hit the gym. I'm gonna get slim. I'm gonna get strong. Well, we do know that Matt has observed, like, comments in the first episode, like, you know, you've lost weight and you've gained muscle. It's like maybe he is training, like, you know what I mean? Yeah. Then we get such a crispy scene. It's just like the crispiest shit of all time. Like grimy, like just this is the most Matt Murdock has ever looked like. Matt Murdock in this scene where he has the run-in with the shitheel cop in the bathroom, Matt looks the way I feel when I'm hungover. Like, it's just the crispiest motherfucker, and he has a run-in with this shitheel cop in the bathroom. And the next kind of... and I don't know where the graffiti is. I've just written it down, which is... so they have the little exchange where he's like, oh, blind lawyer, you know, blind guy who can fight, huh? Matt's just like not fazed by this. But we get Punisher graffiti. I think it's in the street as we cut to Cherrie, maybe, I can't remember. And it's the Punisher logo, and it has the word triggered written over it. Really fantastic detail, like a really curious choice. I was like, huh, that is interesting. Like, you know, obviously the double meaning of the word triggered and the Punisher, like just really evocative, and again adding to that texture and that mystery of like, well, what is this? Is it a cult? Like, is it an organization? Like, what is going on with this? Because we also know graffiti is a big part of this story, in that we've had the night that Fisk was elected, we had people doing graffiti of the Kingpin graffiti, which is like the two faces of Fisk, if you guys remember that, where it's sort of the one face facing you and the other one that's like turned slightly away. The word Kingpin written across it that we've seen a couple times. You know, there's something happening here with graffiti. And I'm wondering if there would be, and I don't know what they're going to do with it, but I'm wondering if there will be some kind of villain associated with ink or color or graffiti or something. Like, this is coming from somewhere. I don't know.
The graffitiist, Daredevil's arch enemy. It's like I remember everyone before the show released, everyone was like, oh, Stiltman is going to be in this show. I just love the idea of like really lame villains.
What's his ultimate enemy is a guy who does graffiti because Matt can't see it. You know what I mean? Like, it's defeated by the graffiti guy.
I mean, you know, if we're being real, like, I think the graffiti is probably just another element, like the Vox Pops. It's like kind of catching the social temperature.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. I think it's also telling that, like, we sort of had this illusion that the Punisher is like kind of that the cops have taken him on as like someone that they idolize, not really knowing that the actual Frank Castle would fucking despise police. Like, you know, like there's also that element too, I think, that it's trying to remind you of. Yeah. And yeah, so I guess we should talk about the opening of the trial, right? That's like the big first sequence here. Oh, that was the other thing I had, sorry. Is when he talks to what is it that he says? Oh, it's during his opening like salvo, where whoever he's because he's interrogating Hochberg initially, right? That's the first scene we get. Hochberg being the dead cop's partner. Matt is.
No, Hochberg is the lawyer that is representing the people. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Because Matt has that little salvo at him as he's talking, where he goes, Hochberg makes some crack about Matt having a black eye or something. And Matt comes back with like, oh no, that's right. Sorry, there's a lot of details in here getting mixed up. He's talking to the cop on the stand, the dead cop's partner, who has a black eye. And Matt says something like, you know, there's this thing they say in boxing, the best cure for a black eye is fast hands. And obviously the other lawyer objects. But it's such a good little moment of like, again, Matt's dad is a boxer. He has some of these little sayings in his repertoire. It's just very good, consistent characterization for me. You know, talking to this dude who tried to kill him the previous night, and just getting this jab in is very fun to me.
Yeah, but I like how it's like not pertinent to the case, and so the judge gets really annoyed at him.
Yeah.
I just thought that was really funny.
Yeah, there's something really petulant about it.
Yeah.
Where is it that guy says a blind guy who could fight?
It's in the bathroom before the trial.
Because I thought it was really odd that it's like the whole thing plays out like the cop knows that Matt knows who he is, even though he's blind and wouldn't know who the two guys are that assaulted him. So him saying a blind guy who could fight, Matt's reaction should have been, "Oh, you're the guy who attacked me?" ? Right?
I mean, they yell at him. He knows their voices. Like, I don't know. Like, I think they assume he assumes that they know that he. I don't. Like, you know what I mean? Like I don't think it's a detail enough that the story needs to focus on. I think it's just taken as writ that that they know Matt knows who they are.
I don't know, it's like everything that went down. Maybe they're just painting them to be like really, really stupid. Like everything that went down with those cops. When they're like, oh, we have to beat up the blind guy so he'll tell us which way the dude ran off. And then they tell the blind guy, oh, you beat us up. When he wouldn't have known it was them. Like all of that ties together to either...
That would make sense if they're just writing these guys as idiots. Like that also wouldn't surprise me. I don't think that this show has a particularly dim view of police. And I think this is probably of a piece with that to me. Yeah. Yeah, and then we get everyone lying about what happened that night. Yeah, so Dead Cop's partner lies about what happened. He basically tells this fiction about Hector coming up and attacking him and out of nowhere.
Officer Powell. That's what I was doing the last few minutes trying to find his name. Officer Powell.
My names are all over the shop in these notes. I've got Forrest, but I don't know who Forrest is. What is that?
Who the fuck is Forrest?
Was I thinking Torres? Like, I just don't know.
Oh, yeah, maybe.
Because Nickey Torres is the... Anyway, whatever. And I had in my notes again, there's another cop with a Punisher tattoo who, like, leans over and whispers something. And then we get a rerun of the getting the witness to the courthouse scene from season 3 and also every law procedural drama.
Yeah, right.
It's
pretty cliche, but
it's good.
Yeah.
Hey, look, let me tell you, Pat. I've been watching a lot of Michael Mann lately, and there is nothing wrong with a dramatic get the witness to the courthouse sequence before they get killed. Okay, it's good fun, and I'm here for it. Yeah, Cherrie makes himself bait, and ends up dragging the Powell, you just said Officer Powell, ends up dragging Powell away, and one of Matt's like people that works for him manages to get Nickey to the courthouse. And then and you're like, oh my god, thank god they got him here alive. He's gonna testify. Thank god. And then he lies on the stand.
This motherfucker.
And there's a lot of what I like is that we don't know why he lies, right? He might have just cracked under the pressure of staring at all the police. He didn't want to make himself a target. Someone might have got to him.
They just didn't give him any cocaine. They dosed him up a day ago, but he needed his pre-trial cocaine.
Darth, that was not cocaine, Darth. That was heroin. I'm pretty sure that was heroin.
I'm as straight-laced as you get. It's the same thing to me.
Yeah, but actually, that is a good point. He's a junkie of some description, which is how he got pinched in the first place and became a CI. Is that he was caught dealing, and that was kind of how he ended up, in this position. And crucially, Powell's done a good job of keeping this relationship with Torres completely off the books, all via cash. There's no way to trace this back and prove that he was a CI. And so they're kind of now in this position where they just don't have like a strategy. He was their entire strategy. So they're kind of fucked. And kind of concurrent to that, we then have the new Wesley type character going out to deal with Fisk's old bosses. And he he pays off the head of the Irish part of the crime family with $1.8 million to settle this beef, this drama or whatever, which is just so much money. But yeah, do you guys have anything on that little moment and this kind of remedy that Fisk has attempted?
900k per person. That's how much their life is worth. That's a fair amount.
Yeah.
I liked the way that the dude played it, where he's like Wesley, but not. Like, he's more jovial, more casual, I guess.
More British.
More British, yeah.
Yeah.
You know what's weird is that we had a British version of Wesley in season 3 in Felix Leiter, didn't we? Not Felix. Felix Leiter's the character from James Bond, but Felix, his Fisk's fixer.
Yeah.
Which is just funny to me. Yeah. But hey, he's cool. And I love his little line at the end where they're like, oh, like one of the guys is making some quip about Fisk. It's like, oh, you fucking the mayor's little bitch or whatever, like, some version of that. And he's like, as he walks away, the dude goes, I don't work for the mayor, I work for the man. And I was like, that's a really compelling bit of characterization. Yeah, I thought that was great. Yeah, and so this is Fisk attempting to remedy this little kind of criminal war that started in the background now that Vanessa's sort of no longer sitting at the head of the table. And then we go to the only choice that Matt has, which is to put Hector on the stand and do something really stupid, which is reveal.
Oh, well.
Yeah.
Hold on.
Yeah.
Well, it's Fisk trying to fix it, or is it? Isn't that the next scene after is where it reveals that it was Vanessa?
I thought he told Vanessa that he did that, or am I wrong?
No. So the scene afterwards, yeah, she did it, and then and that's like the reveal, and then I can't. What happens?
That's
Fisk
when
when
he says the chaos thing. He's like, we needed chaos to.
Right. Okay.
That's right. And he has this line where he's like, "Let's not slip into a place where I don't trust you." And she gives him this look like, "The fuck did you just say to me?" Like, that's so good.
Oh, this is probably some toxic stuff, guys.
Well, I think the funny thing about the look that she gives him is because that was her money that she gained from running the business properly. And he's telling her not to give away her money. Right?
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. Like he has sort of not as much leverage. Like, he's, as you say, he's not the one who's been running the business. Like, to tell her that she's doing her job wrong when she's literally like been the one, managing the whole thing.
And I don't know.
I
don't know if we've really emphasized it, but it's not that she's just been running the business, but that she has done it in a fashion that keeps the books so clean that they can never possibly be caught for anything illegal, which they like really emphasized. So, like, he never could have done that. He always has had something that ended up getting them caught, but they've said it several times that she ran it in a way that will not get them caught.
Well, and part of that is that she's doing that using the art industry to launder this money, to clean this money, right?
Which never happens in real life.
That would never happen in real life. The arts are sacred, and we would never do that. But no, I think it speaks to her character that it's that she used to do this art curation and is familiar with this high class world that moves in big sums of money, and that she now has this criminal experience. You're right, Darth. Fisk could never have done this, and that's a really cool choice to be like, yeah, there is actually something about her that makes her uniquely capable of doing this, you know?
Actually, yeah, and earlier, I can't remember, it's probably in the first scene with Vanessa and Fisk where she's talking about that yellow painting, and she's like, we could have gotten 200 million from the sale. And Fisk goes, no, we can't. We have to let it go because I'm trying to, create this air of legitimacy. So the fact that Fisk still doesn't trust her that the money is going to come in, cleanly. Even though Vanessa, because she's involved in this world, in both worlds, the art world and the criminal world, and she knows what she's doing. I think that is emblematic of what the rift in their relationship is, a lack of trust.
Yes.
And yeah, that's that's pretty evident when at the beginning of that scene when Vanessa gives him that look.
Well, it's a lack of trust, and it's that he underestimates her as well, right? He doesn't think that she can do this thing. Yeah, it's both. And that's kind of worse, right? It's not just that you don't trust me, it's that you also don't trust me to get it done. You don't think I have the juice for it. Yeah. It's a pretty toxic place they find themselves in, by the end of this episode, really. And you kind of get that with the little argument before the therapy session, right? Where they kind of they do that whisper yell thing that I love, where a couple's having an argument and they're trying not to yell at each other, but they are yelling at each other, but they're whispering while they yell at each other because they don't want to yell at each other because they don't want to fight, but they are fighting. It's such a great directorial choice to have that conversation feel the way it does. Yeah.
And I thought that was really funny. I don't know if funny is the right word, but that was progress that they were making in their relationship to even have that argument.
Yes. And
it was interrupted by the therapist.
Yes. That's great. Yeah, exactly. Well, and to Pat's point before as well, there's enough passion there for them to be fighting now, right? That's progress, as opposed to before where it was very empty and sterile, I guess. Yeah.
I do wonder how intentional that was, that when they're together with Heather, they seem to be making no progress. But when Heather's out of the room, they're allowed to talk freely. And what is that message,
Yeah. You have to wonder how much of them seeing Heather is optics as well. And if that's something that they are broadcasting or if that's private. Do you know what I mean? Because I think that would change how I read that. If they're doing this
with the NDA, you got to assume it was private.
Well, no, I mean, not necessarily. That would be an NDA for the details, but they could sort of be we're working on a marriage, we were estranged for a while. I don't know. I think there's a narrative they could spin without revealing what the therapy is for. But you guys are probably correct. I do think that changes it.
The therapy is to get to a place where they can appear like a strong, healthy couple, because I feel like that was the impetus for starting it, is because Fisk's assistant went, your Vanessa's reluctance to be a part of the narrative hurts you with the traditional voters.
Right. Oh, okay. Yeah, got it. So I understand. So it's really about getting to a place where on the other side of this, they can comfortably stand together, and at least for the length of however long he's mayor, they can stand each other, basically.
Yes.
Got it.
Yes.
Cool. God,
the goal of all marriages.
These guys, Fisk and Vanessa hate each other, but they hate each other. You know what I mean? They hate each other, but they hate each other. And you're like, all right, please just not while I'm in front, not while I'm in the room, whatever. They're the type of couple where anytime you're in the room and they're fighting, you're they're this close to fucking every time they fight. I reckon that's what we're going to get by the end of this season. I reckon it's just going to be vile to spend time with them.
We shall see.
We'll see.
I respect that. You wanted to keep the peace. Sometimes peace needs to be broken. And chaos must reign. Just for a moment. To build a stronger order.
Is that what it is? Chaos before a stronger peace? Or is it my penance for what I did?
No.
You're punishing me for Adam.
I'm not punishing you for anything.
You're leaving me out in the cold.
Thank you for your patience. Now, where were we?
Anyway, so that's kind of the B plot of the episode, is Fisk dealing with this thing with Vanessa, and the criminal empire. But the big plot thing is obviously the trial itself. Yeah, they don't really have a choice. They put Hector on the stand, where they basically want to show the jury the same man that they see, which, you know, is this family man. What do you guys make of Hector's testimonial here? What's your kind of takeaway from the testimonial?
Specifically only Hector's testimony, like about his story.
Yeah, because he sort of, you know, he tells the story of what he was doing the night of, right? Where he sort of goes, you know, my wife and I live with my sister and my niece. You know, we've always dreamt of having our own place, and I finally saved up the money. I put a deposit down on a studio in South Bronx. It's not much, but it's ours. I was going there to put flowers there for the next day. And then Matt's like, because you were going to surprise your wife, right? It paints such a vivid portrait, again, of this man trying to repair this marriage that has been fractured by the fact that he is White Tiger, you know?
I think it's the fact that we like know what actually happened. I feel like maybe your mind isn't meant to go to this place, but mine did, where he's painting a picture of himself as like, you know, just like, oh man, he's a gentle family man, you know, like really like, you know, a story that tugs at your heartstrings kind of stuff, you know, struggling financially, does what he can to support his family. But then, like, you know, it's so obviously like playing to, not falsely, but it is playing to the emotions of the jury. And then, you know, just thinking about Officer Powell's testimony, where it's something similar, you know, my friend and I, you know, 8 years of drinking beers and talking about our kids and talking about football, stuff like that, all that's gone. It's interesting how similar the tone is for both stories, but obviously one is like purely false in the performance, and the other one is, you know, genuine. It's like, well, if you're a jury member, like how do you know the difference? Like, I don't know.
And there's something so, like, I don't know what the right adjective is, but Powell's testimony by comparison feels so, it's like false doesn't quite capture the thing, right? It feels like craven and cynical in comparison to Hector's. And there's something about that which I was talking before about this show's conceptualization of policing. There's something about how subtly it makes Powell feel like this. He's not even evil. He's just like deeply self-serving to this institution of the fraternity of policing, right? And I think the subtlety with which they achieve that with his testimonial is only possible because you have the direct comparison of Hector doing something similar. I think in isolation, it would feel less cynical. There's a really good structural, effect that produces for me in this episode.
It actually sounds a lot like Dex when he's like, that sounds really rough. And you're like, no human says it like that.
Right. Yeah, there's a practice to it. There's a lack of emotionality to it. You know, and like because we know that the truth is it is 8 years of beers and talking about our kids, but it's also 8 years of shaking down CIs and 8 years of being in on the cut, and it's 8 years of doing the wrong thing every day when you wake up and go to work, right? Like it is those things he says, but those things are false because they are undercut by the fact that it's 8 years of them, you know, essentially being the bad guys, type of thing.
Well, wouldn't that have been more powerful had, like, imagine if he was not just kind of BSing his way through this, but he was legitimately close friends with that partner that died, and he actually, like, is crying when he's saying 8 years of talking about our kids. But the fact that he doesn't have that emotion indicates that they didn't have a real friendship, and it was just kind of like buddy work colleagues, you know? So if he had more emotion when he's delivering that, I don't know. Like, I understand what you're talking about with it juxtaposing with Hector's delivery, but I wonder how that would have played out, because it would have made you actually a little bit sympathetic for the murderer.
I feel like that is exactly the practice that David is talking about, though. Not hamming it up too much, because you're still acting the role of a police officer, right? Like, sort of, you know, not austere, but, you know, you
have courtroom training, right?
You're like, stable. Yeah, you're stable and you're confident, and, you know, this is part of the job kind of thing. But you still lost a friend, so, you know, you're going for a very specific tone of you know, being sad on the inside but being composed on the outside, kind of thing. Like, and
that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's
That always makes me think of that episode of Brooklyn Nine-Nine where they're trying to train, I can't think of the character's name, but the scary one. They're trying to train her, like, how to be normal in courtrooms because she's too intense and, like, scary. It's like that kind of vibe where you're like, yeah, like, this guy just, yeah, you're right, Pat. It's both too controlled and too deliberate but also, like, deliberately not controlled. Like, yeah, it feels like a facade. In a way that a cop would have to be when they are providing testimonial for, like, some other case. But here it fails because he also has to be emotional, which he can't quite get right. Yeah. I just think it's a really brilliantly structured episode in that way. You know, and it's ostensibly an episode about truth, and trust and, like, intentions as well. You know, the next thing that happens is we get that Matt reveals the white tiger thing to the court, right? And the way he does it is he realizes that he's not going to get... I'm not sure what you guys make of Matt's interiority in this moment, but I think he realizes he needs a Hail Mary, and he's got to do something, because he hasn't won the jury over enough. So he whips out the mask, and he asks Hector on the stand, like, isn't it true that you're the vigilante white tiger? And obviously the courtroom kind of, you know, goes bad, and you know, he gets pulled into the judge's chambers. And the judge is like, dude, what the fuck? Like, are you kidding me? You stood here and you fucking lied to me. You manipulated me to keep this suppressed. It's so good. Yeah, what do you guys make of the reveal and this decision that Matt has here?
I mean, it's of all people, you should know that you don't reveal another superhero's identity.
That's not cool, man.
It's kind of a dick move.
Yeah.
Yeah, not cool. Yeah, I mean, that was surprising.
When he was talking later with Hector in the jail cell, and Hector was like, that wasn't your secret to tell, or whatever, I really thought Matt was going to be like, okay, yo, to make up for it, I'm Daredevil. I tell people all the time.
Yeah. So did I. I think he comes
I thought so as well, yeah.
This close. I think he's thinking about it. And it's when he says, you realize you can't be White Tiger anymore. It's that moment when I was like, oh, he's not going to tell him. Because then, you know, and because Hector's like, look, you know, it's a calling. It's who I am. It chose me. Like, you might as well ask me to stop breathing. You know what I mean? And that's, I think, where there's that line in the sand where it goes from a possibility that Matt's going to tell him to absolutely not telling him. Yeah. Very cool. Yeah, and essentially, like, so we get the reveal. They break to deal with this thing. They're going to keep going with the trial. And the next kind of scene we have is, those two talking to each other when Matt tells them, like, hey, you can't be White Tiger anymore. And Hector's like, well, that's not going to happen. And it's a conversation between one man who can't live without his mask, and one man lying to himself about the fact that he can't live without his mask, right? Matt is desperately trying not to be Daredevil anymore and is not willing to admit that that is a part of himself. And here's someone sitting in front of him with a family, albeit a complicated one, but with a family and with someone who has completely made peace with the fact that this mask is a part of who he is and is essential to who he is. And Matt is trying to convince this guy, and in some ways convince himself, that it's okay to never do this again. That there's some way that life could exist absent these masks. You know, to your point earlier, Pat, about him seeing himself in Hector, this is the most literalization of that in this episode so far, is this conversation.
Yeah.
I think it was kind of... Go ahead, Pat.
Just the fact that... Yeah, I don't know. Matt's clearly, like, lying to himself in this scene. And the fact that he revealed his identity like it was no big deal, but then he won't tell him that he's Daredevil, and then going on about all this stuff about, oh, you don't need the mask to, you know, feel fulfilled. Like, he's, I don't know, Matt's slipping into like real hypocrite territory. I feel he just, he's sliding backwards.
Yeah.
I was going to derail the educational talk and just be like, I thought when he held up the mask, it was really goofy looking.
I mean, it is kind of a goofy looking mask because the stitch like goes right across the forehead.
Yeah.
It looks homemade. Yeah.
And then he held it up like in the middle of court, like it was this like huge thing, and I was just kind of like, I kind of giggled, like it was silly looking. I was like, that's not the tone you were going for.
What I like too is, as he's doing it, McDuffie can see him thinking about doing this, and she's like, "Don't do this, Matt. Don't do it." Like, she's literally hissing at him as he's about to do it. I love their relationship. They are such a fun law firm duo. I really enjoy it. I like that he's the kind of emotional, rash one. He's kind of the Foggy in this relationship in some ways. It's cool. And yeah, the other thing I really like is their sort of plan is to bring out all of the witnesses to the crimes that White Tiger has prevented. Or not crimes. It's the detail I really like. It's the people he's helped. First and foremost, White Tiger isn't Daredevil. For the most part, it sounds like. He's not necessarily going out every night and beating up criminals. He's like helping people in car accidents and doing like civic things to help people out in the community when they're in trouble. And so many of these stories are, you know, about, you know, he saves police, for, you know, who are in trouble, and he helps people out. Like, there's a kind of civic mindedness to the way that these anecdotes blur together in this montage that paints the picture of a man who, yes, first and foremost, fights criminals, but is primarily concerned with helping the community. And the anecdotes demonstrate that really clearly. I just thought it was a very good and wholesome way to portray this type of character, in some ways in comparison to the Daredevil that we're familiar with, who is this kind of tortured moral fucking paradox of a man who is torn between, you know, this self, you know, White Tiger is someone who has healed the rift between himself and his vigilante identity, and in doing so is able to become someone who is like civically minded and able to help in a way that Daredevil kind of can't imagine himself being, I think, in the previous version of the show. you know, it's really quite a beautiful way to imagine what this character could be versus how he's being portrayed by, you know, as just a quote unquote vigilante. You know?
Yeah. Well, Daredevil's genesis was him hearing, you know, a father like abuse his daughter at night, and so he goes out and inflicts punitive justice, and he needs to build up fear in the city to, you know, make sure that criminals are scared to go out at night at the risk of being, you know, beat to a pulp. Whereas with White Tiger, as he says, he does those things because it's the right thing to do. Yeah, you're right. It is a very wholesome twist on that motivation, yeah.
Something I thought was really interesting was the comparison between the two that y'all were talking about, and he was saying to all of the Matt was saying to all of the cops in the room, how many of you here had your lives saved or helped out by this man? And I was like, it's the exact opposite for him. He could have said, everyone here raise your hand if you were beaten up by Daredevil. And like half the cops in the room have been beaten up by Daredevil. Like he had to fight the cops more than he was ever helping them, you know?
Totally. Yeah. Yeah.
That is true.
God, this show's so good. I also think I just have to say this because I don't want to get the fucking comment. One of he lists off a series of police reports of police that have been helped out by White Tiger.
Officer Morales.
And we got Officer Morales, which is Miles Morales' father. You're welcome, Marvel heads. Connected universe confirmed. Yeah, just a bit of fun. They sneaked that in there.
Were you gonna talk about Hawk's rebuttal?
I was going to talk about Matt's closing argument and then his rebuttal.
Oh, okay, yeah, go for it.
Because that's the order that. So Matt's closing argument. After to your point, Pat, Matt is asking Hector, like, why did you do these things to help the community? And he says, because it's the right thing to do. And he says, but you put yourself in harm's way time and time again, like without regard for yourself. And he's like, it's the right thing to do, right? We get the portrait of a very moral man. And Matt's closing argument is this. He says, the police said that Hector attacked them, that he came out of nowhere. That's what they said. But why would Hector, the White Tiger, why would he do this without the amulet that gives him extraordinary strength and power? Why would any of you walk into battle with one arm tied behind your back? I wouldn't. Every night, Hector Ayala goes out and risks his life to keep his neighborhood safe, to protect his community. So ask yourselves, does this sound like the type of man who'd murder a police officer in cold blood? He is a man of integrity. The community says so. The police say so. The mask doesn't make the man. And whether Hector Ayala's wearing a White Tiger suit or not, he's a hero. Thank you.
Can I just say only in a Marvel thing could you get like a sober court trial where they say, and he wasn't wearing his amulet that gives him power. I just thought that was like a really funny thing to say in this setting.
He wasn't wearing his his White Tiger suit, and it's said with the most serious tone of all time.
Exactly, yeah.
It's awesome. Actually, I think you would get this in a Batman story as well. There's plenty of stuff in the Penguin that's like people saying shit like this deadpan. Yeah. But yeah, I think to your point, Pat, you know, in comparison, Hotch's argument just is so cynical and craven. The way he he takes Matt's remarks and tries to twist them when we know he knows what actually happened. It comes across as so vile.
But it was so well delivered, though.
It
was so good.
Yeah, well, it's the argument to make. Like, you know, it's like the best option. Yeah, for sure.
Do you want to explain his rebuttal, Pat?
Yeah. So basically, he says Hector Ayala. Hector Ayala has done some good things. Does that make him incapable of doing a bad thing? That is basically his argument. And so this is interesting because if you'll remember, episode 3 of the first season of Daredevil is also a court trial. The difference is this trial is kind of the inverse of that trial, in that in that trial from the first season, what they're arguing is that because there was a witness that did see him kill other people, so it's not about whether he was acting out of good or evil. What matters is that specific scenario and the circumstances around there, and the argument was that he was acting in self-defense. Whereas in this, it's not like a question about it's that we know he was acting out of good is the difference, but and the Hawk's rebuttal is still that same what if of like what matters is the circumstances around it. If yes he has done good things, that doesn't mean he couldn't suddenly turn around in this moment and do a bad thing.
Yeah, totally. And what I really like about the way that he frames it is like he's not wrong. Like the rhetorical maneuver here is like a correct one, which is like good people do bad things all the time. What is unsaid here is that terrible people do good things all the time as well, right? There's that famous Stephen King thing, which is like, he says, someone says, how do you make a serial killer human? And he goes, well, it's simple. Serial killers still help old ladies across the street, right? There's a kind of, there's a corollary here that goes unspoken, which is the truth, which is these awful police sometimes actually help the community, right? And I like that in this moment, I don't know about you guys, but I was on the edge of my seat being like, did that work? Like, this feels like such a razor's edge for this court case in this moment where I'm like, you're right, Pat. He says the exact right argument, and I'm like, oh no. If these people give in to their cynicism and this cravenness, and they don't risk going against the police, this might not go our way. And it feels so fraught, especially with how seriously Matt takes this, right? We get the new Daredevil theme playing as Matt sits alone in the empty courtroom, holding the devil horn, sort of thinking and waiting for the jury to determine their verdict. And the piano kind of lilts across the scene as we get the reveal of whether or not Hector is going to be found guilty here. And thank goodness he's found not guilty on all charges. But boy, if that scene isn't deeply melancholic and like the sinking feeling I had, because my first thought, the second that they read that, I was like, thank God. And then the second thought was, oh, what are they going to do in retaliation though? To what Cherrie said, this machine is going to keep going until someone is held accountable for this death. And it's only at this moment after the trial's over that it becomes evident there was no such thing as a good outcome here. Right? He's found guilty. He goes to prison for the rest of his life, or he's found innocent, and the police get to him anyway. Right? It's a foregone conclusion that this ends in tragedy for Hector. Absolutely brilliant. I don't know. What do you guys think of how this resolves?
We probably ought to start making the distinction between police and the cult of the Punisher, because we definitely don't want to paint all of the police in the bad light, because even in the show there are good cops.
I'm talking when I talk like that, I'm talking about the institution of the police, not the individual police, right? Like we know that the institution of the police, particularly in New York, is like has for a long time been like a deeply corrupt, flawed institution. I'm not even talking about the cult that is like within that, right? Like I think that's like you can kind of contend with that separately as its own thing. I'm talking about the overall apparatus that lets you get to a place like this.
In a case like this where like someone is accused of murdering a cop, accused, like not proven, it's such a massive hurdle to get over that accusation compared to any other scenario or with any other institution involved. It's because it's the cops, and I get like that tells you just like, you know, what kind of force you're up against.
Yeah, and we kind of saw that in season 1 when they managed to kind of untangle Fisk from the police, you know, the corruption that he's sort of put forward throughout Hell's Kitchen. And one of the things that we learned is like he's actually got like a senator on his payroll. Like the police have such a there's such a formidable force that is connected to so many other parts of law enforcement and government that, like, yeah, just to reinforce that point, Pat, they are so it is such a huge thing to overcome. It's like almost existential in its in its scale, and it's gonna find somebody. It's gonna keep going until it finds someone accountable. Right? That's what Cherrie said. He's 100% right.
Yeah, and the fact that, you know, there's like so much tension like leading up to the verdict, right? And I feel like it achieves the same effect as if, you know, he was found guilty. Like the feelings you're feeling just before they announce the verdict, and because it is such a monumental task to get acquitted. And you know, you it's like, you know, you're expecting he's going to get found guilty, but that's you know, but intellectually that sort of produces the same effect as if he was, if that makes sense. It's kind of like the end of Get Out, where like he's like, you know, crawling on the road with his, you know, dead girlfriend, or she's not dead, but, you know, she's bloodied up, and then the cop car pulls out, and then you just from real world context you have this idea like, oh, I know what's going to happen, but then it's his friend that gets out, and it still gives you that idea. It still presents you with that idea or evokes it, but, you know, it goes a different direction. Yeah.
That's actually that's really well observed. I think, yeah, it produces the same psychological effect for you as the reader, basically. I mean,
did either of you have the thought that he should have been guilty of something? I don't know if it would have been like third degree or if there's what level below that, because like his actions directly contributed to a death that was unintentional. It was not premeditated. So it's something. I think he should have actually been guilty and charged with something,
of
not
like
murder.
Manslaughter.
Yeah.
Yeah, like,
yeah,
I think,
that
like,
did cross my mind as well.
Yeah, like Manslaughter 3 or something like that, where there wouldn't be any like prison time or anything like that. Like something like that would make sense to me. But it's more dramatic and potent that it's not guilty on all charges, right?
Yeah, like this, it kind of turned into like an emotional story, more about emotion in the end. As McDuffie prefaces, like in this episode of the last one, she says these court cases are equally about emotion as they are about facts, you know.
Well, this also might lend to further episodes and Fisk's argument that these vigilantes have too much power because this guy legitimately should have been charged and he wasn't because he's a vigilante. Like the law let him go for murder, or quote unquote murder.
Well, yeah, well that's definitely a point that Fisk can like put pressure on. Yeah, gives him something to latch onto, like a you know, arguably legitimate point. Yeah,
which is especially ironic given how this cop ended up getting killed was doing something illegal. Like it.
Yeah.
There's this again, and it feels like this entire recording session I've just been dragging the police, which is partly what I've been doing. But, you know, we all know as an institution it has deep problems. This has such a coherent understanding of how this stuff. If you've seen The Wire, or you've rewatched The Wire recently, that has a very similar comprehension of policing and the way that this stuff happens. Where I think it's like in season 3 or whatever, where at a certain point the police start to realize like it's more trouble for them getting the drugs off the street, and that's where you get the solution of like the paper bag, where it's like if we can't see it, we're not going to get in the way and create more problems. There is like a tacit agreement or a complicity that policing inherently produces in these crime stories, where there are so few good, and this is part of what what you get with this being very similar to kind of a Batman story and things like that, is it's almost impossible to be a good cop, right? Because of the institution of policing and the things it forces you to engage with. And that impossibility, I think, is painted here with a lot of deftness and delicacy that doesn't feel like it's just bashing the idea of police. It feels like it's actually contending with the material reality of being police in a given world where there are vigilantes and there's a Fisk and, all these other elements we're all familiar with. Yeah. Then, okay, do you guys have anything else before we quickly talk about Heather and then I guess the big ending here? So next sequence is Matt and Heather celebrating the win. And, Heather kind of gently breaches the fact of, like, you don't seem super happy about this. Like, there's something off with you. And he's like, yeah, like, I've just been thinking, I've been thinking about, Foggy. And she kind of asks a little bit about him. He goes, well, the win isn't complete, not quite yet. One thing's missing. You see, my old partner and I, straight out of law school, we were so broke, we pulled about everything we had together for an office bottle of Omel Vinnies, which is a hard word to say because it's a made-up whiskey brand. Only broke it open when we won. Needless to say, the first bottle lasted a very long time. Now, something I really like is, and this is going to be difficult to explain because I think people might find this stuff. I think people sometimes view this as like, some people would call this like an era in canon or like a continuity error because we never saw this before, right? We never saw them drinking Omel Vennies to cheers to a case they won or whatever. I think some people have a tendency.
They never won a case.
That's true. We saw the case Pat was talking about. They literally won in that first season. Anyway. They win Frank Castle's trial. Anyway, whatever. They win it. Listen, I know my Daredevil facts, Darth. You can't pull that shit with me. But what I like about this is it produces extra context for their relationship and for the world these characters inhabit that we didn't see on screen. And I always love whenever a story can do that in a way that feels contiguous. And, Heather kind of very warmly, she sort of says, well then, here's to a man who cooks, a well-won case, and Foggy Nelson. May God hold them all in the hollow of his hand. Just a beautiful saying from Heather. And that's where we get the title of the episode, Hollow of His Hand.
But Matt didn't seem to appreciate it much. Seemed kind of annoyed.
I think he's waiting for the other shoe to drop. I don't know. That's my feeling.
He's like, it's like too good of a moment.
Yeah,
I thought he just regretted bringing up Foggy. Like, he wasn't really ready to talk about it, and her being a therapist, he was like, I really don't want to talk about it.
That's actually an interesting read. Yeah, I think you could read this scene about 5 different ways to figure out why he's like this, but I mean, he does kind of say like he's not really over it. Like, that's kind of how that conversation starts. So like. And it's maybe the first big case. This is the kind of stunt case he took on with Foggy all the time. And so you can imagine, I'm sure if you guys have experienced that kind of loss, when you have something good happen, it is a very complicated thing to try and feel good about something when you're missing somebody and that there's sadness there. And there's a lot of feelings that get wrapped up in that. But to have someone this supportive and gentle in this moment is really new for Matt. And to something that you were talking about before, Darth, of this question of like, why is Heather shown to be this way? I also think this is a moment where like we get to see what about this relationship is really working for them. And it is these moments where he's not super happy about something and she's helping him navigate that and she's there with him and she's not pressuring him to feel good, right? She's meeting him where he's at and letting it be okay that he's a bit sad at the same time.
Yeah. I keep waiting for the reveal that she's like a ninja or something.
She's the hand.
Yeah. That would be funny. Pulls off the mask. It's Elektra.
It's Electra's sister.
Yeah, twin, secret evil twin sister that we didn't know about.
Yeah. I just want to point out the last line about God. Like, is she religious? Is there anything to indicate that?
I don't think so. Not yet, anyway.
Because I'm wondering if she just said that for Matt, like, and she's just like sort of, I don't know. I feel like that would be an interesting thing to explore if like she was more or less like an atheist, and like how that would, I don't know, how that would work.
I don't know. I can't imagine she'd be an atheist. I feel like she'd be agnostic. Maybe, I don't know.
Isn't he kind of ex-Catholic now, though?
That does seem to be the implication. Yeah, actually, that's a good question, Pat. Do you think Matt is still religious?
Yeah, I think so.
Concluded, sorted, done, solved. Text is solvable. You heard it here first. I think it's probably deliberate that it's ambiguous. I said that weird. Ambiguous. We've been talking for too long. I think it's good that it's ambiguous, that we don't know if he's still religious. It's also the most Daredevil-ass fucking aphorism. The other show, the Netflix show is full of people saying shit like this on a episode-by-episode basis of just these little epigrams that, this is the type of thing that you could imagine Father Lantom being like, there's this saying, may God hold them all in the hollow of his hand. And what a lot of people don't understand is that actually, the origin of that is fraught by the and you can imagine him having some theological point about the saying.
You're just making me miss Father Lantom.
Sorry.
I want him back.
Yeah, we miss him, but unfortunately he got killed by Dex.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
he did.
R.I.P. But yeah, I just think it's a really lovely scene. And it is the kind of thing that just I've said this before, but it can be very difficult to write functional relationships in media because if you don't get it right, it can feel kind of boring. And so it's always cool to see a show be able to kind of contend with trying to write people that are in something resembling a healthy relationship. Ought to do well.
I just now realized the immediate foreshadowing of toasting the dead guy, saying God will hold you in the hollow of his hand, and then cut to the secondary hero of the episode getting murdered.
Yeah, the cool shove effect is pretty strong here. The second that those words come out of her mouth, I'm like, oh no. Like, cause I already had a sinking feel. Like, I was waiting for the other shoe to drop. But then when you get Fisk calling BB Urich, and this is the fucking delicious icing on the cake, calls BB Urich Ben's niece, a man who he murdered in cold blood with his bare hands, and he calls her, and through her uses her reporting to deliver an invitation to the streets to kill Hector. Now, to what extent you want to read what Fisk specifically says, and I'll give it to you in a second, to what extent you want to read this as a vague piece of ideology that then this, whatever this cult thing is, the Punisher thing, whether he tells them directly or it's an invitation, you can read it as a treatise, as a piece of ideology. You could read it as instruction. I'm not going to tell you how to think about, that. But it's very evocative, where he says, because obviously it's a problem that Hector's been acquitted on all charges. Fisk says these vigilantes are a threat to any society that's based on the rule of law. A man who wears a mask to cover his face is a coward. These vigilantes are not heroes. And I ran on a promise, and the acquittal of Hector Ayala demands that I keep it. The rule of law must prevail. And as he says the rule of law must prevail, we get the gun firing, and yeah, someone in a Punisher jacket literally just walks up and shoots Hector in the side of the head. He's dead instantly. He's gone out in the white tiger outfit, shot in the side of the head, and we are forced to sit in the devastation of this moment as we hear the frog whistling, and just a silent soundscape. It is just brutal. Yeah. Devastating. Truly impressive television. The way this last little sequence of shots. I don't know about you all, but I was just I was completely in my feelings.
Yeah.
You know.
it shocked the hell out of me. I like let out a little like.
Yeah, I did too, and I was sitting there going, "Oh my gosh, oh my, this is so good. No one will understand it if I try to explain it to them."
And then the frog whistling, I was like, "Oh fuck!" Like, and it just evoked all of that warmth and that. Oh yeah, devastating. So I guess, there's a couple things here that we should touch on before we wrap up. So, I mean, the first and most obvious is the person that kills Hector is in a Punisher jacket. The story does a good job of communicating that this isn't the Punisher. I don't know how to explain it. It just does. We don't see the person's face, but I can tell you for a fact this isn't the Punisher. And maybe it's because John Bernthal has such a specific physicality that he brings to that role. The second I saw the jacket, I was like, oh, this is someone cosplaying. And I think because we had the sort of cosplay aspect of the Punisher tattoos and the graffiti, we kind of had this played up already that we know that within the cops there is a fetishization of the Punisher, and some kind of relationship between these people who fetishize him. So it's sort of setting up.
Well, even more than that, like, we know enough about him to know that he kills the bad guys, and Hector is not a bad guy, right?
Yeah, well, we know that, but I'm thinking like Joe Q regular person who maybe didn't see the original series, right? I agree.
I think they might think it's the Punisher.
Right. Well, that could be a good twist, sort of thing. But yes, we know that he would never do this.
Yeah, I mean, the way he killed him was like kind of like very dishonorable. Like it was kind of like, I don't know, kind of pathetic. Like it wasn't badass or anything. It was just he just approached him and then just like out of like he was hiding and then he like came out of hiding. It's like, come on, man, that ain't Punisher's MO.
Yeah, Frank would spot you opposite you in the street and walk up to you and give you plenty of time to kill him before he killed you. But
or the exact opposite. You would never see him.
Yeah.
He would just shoot you in the back of the head. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, if you're a criminal, he would give you no respect. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Was it a missed opportunity not to take the amulet that gives you superpowers?
Yeah, I would have taken it.
Right?
Huh. It's a good question. Yeah.
Shield's gonna come and collect it.
Yeah, damage control will be there. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting.
And this is my next point is really morbid if you want to talk about the amulet.
Of course it is. He just got shot, Darth. I'm pretty sure, and I could be wrong, that the amulet only works for Hector because it's like a family heirloom type thing.
He did say something about like it called to me specifically.
Yeah, because it's from his family in Puerto Rico. I think is where the powers come from. Like that's where the amulet comes from.
Yeah, but he should have like
Famous
frog whistle powers or something.
He turns into a frog. Oh, we already had Frogman from She-Hulk, so I guess that's taken.
that's taken.
Yeah.
Plus, like, what would his superpowers be? Can hop a bit and has sticky hands. If you lick him, you get high as shit. You know what I mean? I don't know if that's real or if that was just in The Simpsons, but it's still very funny to me.
I didn't know Simpsons. I know it from Family Guy. I didn't know Simpsons did it.
Oh, I didn't know Family Guy did it. There you go. This
Yeah,
is gonna be a
apparently
Berenstein.
animals do it in the wild.
Do they?
Yeah, like monkeys and stuff like lick the toads and they get high.
That's awesome. just being an ape and tripping absolute balls. That's rad.
Yeah, right. You've got nothing else to do.
Yeah, it's true. Can't be, you got no TV to watch. You're a fucking monkey. All right, Darth. What's your morbid point?
It started with me thinking of the amulet and why they didn't steal it, because why not? And then I was like, oh, to make this ending even better, steal both the amulet and the mask. The mask is a trophy for them that they're gonna keep and flaunt to their friends, because cultists would definitely do that. And I wanted, so morbid, I wanted to see his face while the camera kind of panned up, so that the tree frogs come in and we're seeing the poor guy's face lying there dead, which would be much more impactful than the wide shot with the mask still on.
I disagree, because I think forcing us to imagine him and his face is more evocative for me than anything I could have seen on screen. The fact that you get that wide shot and then you cut to black, and all I'm thinking about is the fact that it's Hector, that gentle, kind man. Like, that to me is more effective. Like, I understand what you're saying, because we have different tastes in this type of stuff. But for me, the choice not to show his face and to let him be, yeah, that was much more effective for me. Right. But I understand why Pat, for you. Yeah.
You're the tiebreaker.
Wait, what's your idea, Darth? That like it like pans down to his face?
So like no mask, and we're forced to actually look at him, which is much more personable for me than just seeing his body in a wide shot with the mask still on.
Yeah. Well, I feel like they kind of speed ran this whole like get you to care about Hector Ayala thing. So I don't know. I feel like it may have been a bit too heavy-handed. I don't know. I like how they did it, but I can see how it.
Okay. I'm outvoted.
Yeah.
I'll
that's not how this show works. You're allowed to have an opinion. Yeah, just to say, obviously this is setting up something, right? We know that this Punisher stuff has been building over these 2 episodes. We have the those tattoos and the graffiti. I'm assuming that's where this show is going, is because we know Bernthal's in it.
He's plastered all over Disney Plus.
Yeah, I'm hoping he's.
Yeah.
I'm hoping he's in the next episode, because I want to see the Punisher again. You know what's interesting? We haven't got a like a physical villain yet. Do you know what I mean? Like, we haven't had anyone that Daredevil could feasibly put on the armor and go punch. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, he's the only punching he's done has been like in, I don't know, like exceptional scenarios that have required like a lot of setup and stuff. Yeah. So I think it's like really taken its time to build up to the actual hero villain stuff.
And it's like this has happened before, but this is the most intentional that they've done it, where there is no villain to punch, or you can't punch your way out of the situation. Like, they've tried to do that before, and Matt just hard-headedly goes, no, I'm going to punch my way out of it. But without having a villain to go after, he's like, okay, I got to do this in court, because I can't beat up, cops with tattoos that I can't see.
Yeah. Well, that's part of, not to keep referencing fucking Batman, good grief, but that's part of why the Court of Owls storyline in its original conception in Batman was so interesting, is like, literally none of the tools that he had developed previously could deal with this problem, right? You can't punch what you can't see. They're kind of everywhere. They kind of control everything. I mean, to an extent, that's Fisk in season 3, right? Like, in season 3, Fisk kind of controls everybody. He controls the FBI. Everyone's on the take. Everyone's either being paid by him or is being blackmailed by him. Like, he is so existentially in charge of reality in that season that, like, they have that last-ditch gambit where they're like, okay, we're gonna catch him, and we're gonna show the people. And he manages to get out of it. And by the time you get to that last episode, it is so impossible to imagine that there's any way to stop this guy. There's no amount of punching in the world. And it's only that...
Matt does it anyway.
Well, yes, because it feels good. Feels good, man. But yeah, it's only that Vanessa makes that mistake and happens to be the one that gives the order for Nadeem to get killed. That is ultimately the pincer maneuver that Matt's able to play there. But yeah, good episode of TV. 2 great episodes. I'm having an absolute blast with this TV show. Any final thoughts before we wrap up, gentlemen?
Nope. Good TV show.
Yeah, great TV show. Love it.
Gonna
Okay.
go to sleep sadly thinking about frogs tonight.
We're about to go day drinking, so I don't know if that'll help or make it worse. All right. Next episode, we are talking about Daredevil Born Again episodes 4 and 5, which should be very exciting. So join us for that, where I'm assuming that we're kind of be getting into the big pointy end of like what the season is. This has all been kind of set up, so curious to see where we end up going. Darth, you got anything you want to plug? Anything? This will come out in about a week. You got anything coming up? Anything you want people to hang out for?
No.
Good, concise. And in the Impossible Sliding Doors universe, where you're watching this and you don't know, who we are and our audience, Patrick, people wanted to find more of your thoughts on philosophy, films, and how storytelling works. Where could they find that on the internet?
You could find it at A Method to the Madness. We're on YouTube, Spotify, SoundCloud, and Apple Podcasts. And we also have a website, amttm.com.
Go check that out. All those links are in the show notes. If you want to find, different merch that we have or buy my books or anything like that, you can go to underink.press. Otherwise, this show is brought to you by our patrons over at patreon.com/ZeroIndent. We're a fully independent media outlet, and we do no advertising outside of our own stuff. So if you think someone enjoyed this, if you think someone might enjoy this that you know, send them a link, tell them to stick around. And if you did enjoy it, please consider giving us, whether you're listening on your podcast catcher of choice, give us a review. If you're on YouTube, you give us a like and a comment. All of that stuff really does help more people find the show. But to be honest with you, the best way is for you to tell someone you actually know and recommend it. And if you think, I don't really know anyone, but I'm kind of a nobody on social media, post it in your network. Even if you have like 10 or 15 people that you know, recommendations for shows like this really make a difference to how we grow what we're doing. That'll do it for this episode. I closed my windows. What's the outro? It is... Fuck.
This was not entirely unpleasant.
No, it's we'll see you next time. And in summary, it was not entirely unpleasant to see you again.